Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Neglected Naruto is a medical prodigy. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Morgan Dark and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Forgotten. Kahona 6 years after the Kyuubi attacked Naruto Pav. It had been 6 years since the Kyuubi attacked Kahona. The third Hokage had sacrificed his life to seal the Kyuubi into his twin sister, Shio Uzumaki. Many would believe that his life would be better with a life without being an orphan, without the Kyuubi, and without the hatred of the village. They would think wrong. Naruto Uzumaki had spent 6 years of his life being neglected and slowly being forgotten by his parents. It used to be small things, such as forgetting to call him for dinner, ignoring his suggestions when going out, and never tucking him into bed at night. Eventually, however, the neglect had gotten worse. His parents began to forget him more and more and eventually even forgot his birthday. The people in the village seemed to forget he was even the son of their Hokage and ignore him like any other faceless orphan child of the village. After his forgotten 5th birthday he began to truly raise himself. He cooked his own meals at odd hours to not interact with his family and started to read books on ninja basics. He studied the basics relentlessly to prepare for the academy at age 8. He knew he couldn't count on his parents for training. If he couldn't trust them to remember his birthday, how could he trust them to train him? He knew that they had already started training Shio at age 5. When he asked them to help him train, they simply glanced at him and told him he would be trained at the academy and Shio needed extra help to control the Kyuubi. It was at that point he lost all faith in his parents and he started to not even call them that in his head. He eventually started to leave the estate and train on his own. He soon learned he had an knack for chakra control as he mastered the basic leaf sticking exercise on his 4th try. He eventually got so good at the exercise he could stick more than 10 leaves to his body at a time. However, he knew he would need more instruction than just basic scrolls. He soon started sneaking into Minato's library and stole numerous scrolls on the basics. As he completed more of the chakra control exercises, he learned that unlike his mother and sister, he did not have too much chakra. He still had an above-average level for his age, as expected of any Uzumaki, but not enough for it to be unmanageable. He was reading a specific exercise called tree walking. There were no trees large enough in the estate to really learn the exercise, so he exited the gate and went to the surrounding forest of the Uzumaki estate. He packed a backpack full of items that he would need, a change of clothes, some food, some kunai, shuriken, a bedroll, and some jutsu scrolls from Minato's private library. He was planning on sleeping outside tonight and get away from the estate. It's not like they would remember him anyway. He reached his usual training clearing and prepared to get to work. He had stolen some useful jutsu from Minato. He had stolen the instructions for Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Kage Shuriken no Jutsu, Water Walking, Tree Walking, Kawamari no Jutsu, Henge no Jutsu, Bushin no Jutsu, and a stolen Suna scroll on how to create chakra strings. He had also managed to find some of Tsunade's training scrolls on medical jutsu. He assumed that it was a gift to Minato that he never used. He knew that some of the jutsu were beyond him at the moment. He barely had enough chakra to create 1 Kage Bushin. But he figured out with just 1 Kage Bushin, he could train twice as fast and increase his reserves at the same time. He already knew what he wants to focus on in his ninja career. Whatever Minato and Kushina were bad at he would specialize in. He knows that Minato and Kushina are really bad at medical arts, genjutsu, and poisons. He only wished that Tsunade hadn't left the village after she healed Kushina from the extraction of the Kyuubi. Though he was doubtful that Tsunade would want to teach him, most likely she would just focus on Shio like Jiraiya and Kakashi. He quickly got to work on tree climbing. He knows that theoretically if he masters tree climbing he can master any jutsu, or at least that's what it says in the description. After several tries he found that tree climbing was not that hard. He did not know if it was because of the level of difficulty of the exercise or if he just had good control of his chakra. He trained with tree walking for several hours, slowly being able to walk up the tree without much focus. After his 50th repetition of the exercise he was quite exhausted. He knew it was thanks to his inherited Uzumaki stamina that he had managed to last for so long. As he drank some water he decided to visit the library, a place of solace for him when the neglect gets too much. He wanted to read some medical textbooks to try and get an early start on his medical education. He wanted to at least be able to patch up basic wounds by the time he enters the academy. He enters the library and smiles at the old librarian. The librarian, Yui Haruka, is a retired chunin of the village, with graying brownish hair, large thick glasses. She looked like every other common grandmother. She had been a friend of Naruto since he had started coming here at age 5. She was one of the only villagers who actually pays attention to him. He walked silently to the medical section. Many of the more advanced books were safely stored at the hospital, however there were many books that explained basic medical practices left in the library for aspiring students. The library also had a wide selection of anatomy, botany, biology, and science textbooks for civilian students. Naruto proved his prodigious intellect as he understood the medical texts. After recovering enough chakra he had already made a kage bushin and had read a book on the human anatomy while he read the basics of medical chakra. The book described medical chakra as purified spiritual energy. This purified spiritual energy enters the dead or dying cells of the target and reactivates them, quickly healing the target. However, one must have great chakra control and mental focus to use these techniques because an overflux of medical chakra could kill the cells instead of healing them. The book mentioned some famous applications of healing chakra, such as Tsunade's legendary strength by separating her chakra into spiritual and physical energy. He decided that one of his goals would be to eventually recreate Tsunade's strength. He looked out the window and said that it was getting rather late, the library would be closing soon. He released his clone and closed his eyes to absorb the information from his doppelganger. It appeared that the clone discovered all of the pressure points of the body, the 7 critical spots of the body, and what the chakra system looks like in the human body. It was quite fascinating. He returned to his spot in the woods and after eating a light meal of bread and cheese, went to sleep. The next day 6 a.m. village forest. Naruto woke up to see it was very dark and cloudy today. It was probably going to rain. He quickly packed all of his belongings in his pack and quickly ran back to the estate, hoping to miss the rain. As he was about to open the gate he noticed something wrong right when he tried to open it. It would not open. Growing slightly desperate he tugged harder on the gate. It remained firmly closed. He tried to think of why the gate wouldn't open and his eyes widened. Today was October 1st. Minato always redrew the seals on the estate by the end of each month. One of the seals identified who was allowed into the estate by their chakra signature. Minato must have forgotten to input him into the defenses. He knew that Minato would already be in his office and that Kushina would be making breakfast for Shio soon. He stood there for a few minutes silently as it started to rain. He looked up at the sky and saw it was starting to pour, drenching him. He knew he was finally fully forgotten by the Namikaze family. He wondered why this information hurt him as much as it did. He knew this day would occur eventually. Ever since his 5th birthday he had been preparing for the day his parents abandoned him. He had stocked enough non-perishable food at a cave near the glade he trains in to last him at least 2 years. As he stood there in the rain his anger and hatred grew for the family. He would not beg or yell at that man to let him back into the house. He didn't care that he had no resources or backing from any family anymore. He decided to get revenge on his former family. He knew that this goal would be nearly impossible. The Namikaze Uzumaki family was loved throughout the Land of Fire. Minato was loved by the daimyo and would never hear a bad word against him. He also knew that when Shio entered the academy no one would say anything bad to her. However, he didn't care, he would gain revenge in any way he could. The only possible method to do so in his eyes was to be better than Shio. If he was better than Shio he could prove to everyone in the village he didn't deserve to be forgotten. That he was just as important than the Princess of Kahona. He started to walk back to the forest knowing he had to find shelter from the rain. He knew of a cave near the glade he was in that he can take shelter in. After the rain passes he could figure out what to do. Hidden cave 7 a.m. As he rested inside the cave he used some chakra control exercises to dry his clothes and body from the rain. He had rarely entered this cave, never finding much need to. The cave was the perfect hideout. The natural formation of the trees and shrubbery effectively hid the entrance, while a rock formation around the cave hid it from view even further. But now it was his home for the foreseeable future and he decided to explore it. As he walked down the cave he noticed that the floor was gradually getting smoother and the walls more box shape as he slowly walked deeper into the cave. Eventually he arrived at a steel door, slightly rusted with age. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. He used a trick he discovered from breaking into Minato's library so often. He formed a small chakra string and inserted it into the lock. He started to pump chakra into the string and it expanded into the shape of the key. Slowly turning it he heard a click and the door opened inward. The room inside looked like an abandoned laboratory, filled with jars of animal parts, preserved plants, and many other unknown objects. He looked around a bit more and found a desk next to a distilling station with a journal resting on it. He started to read some of the first pages. January 5th. I recently found a cave that will be perfect for my poison and medical studies. Here I will be able to start my path to power. The snake-san in Orochimaru. January 10th. I have begun testing on small animals my snakes have brought to me. Many of my poisons are still too messy. I have begun to experiment with different venoms and plants to create the perfect poison. February 2nd. I have done it. I have made the perfect poison. After several minutes of applying the poison, it remains completely undetectable for several hours before the animals die of a heart attack. I cannot be sure if the result will have the same effects on humans. I do not wish to be discovered by bringing local bandits to this laboratory. Perhaps some of the children of the civilians of the village can assist me in my projects. Naruto nearly dropped the journal in shock. He had found one of Orochimaru's hidden laboratories. He knew who the Snake Sannin was through Minato's library. He had read about the monstrosities this man had committed against the citizens of Konoha. However, as he stared at the journal, he knew this could be the key in giving him an edge over Shio. He knows that Shio will be getting tutoring from at least 4 cage level ninjas. By the time Shio graduates, she will probably be high Chunin level, even more so if she proves to be a prodigy like her father. He knows to be better than her he would need a serious edge. An edge that could be gained from this laboratory. But could he lower himself to accept tutoring, even indirectly, from one of the most monstrous missing nin in the elemental nations? He looked at more of the passages in the journal, all describing horrific experiments and poisons that could kill anyone. He contemplated on how far he would be willing to go for his revenge. He looked around the lab, seeing all of the tools available to him if he accepted this dark path. He started to remember all of the times his family had forgotten him. He remembered when his family went to the Kyuubi festival, forgetting him at the house. He remembered watching his family eating dinner, all laughing together as a family. He remembered watching from his window as Minato and Kushina began Shio's training, forgetting him entirely. He finally remembered him standing out in the rain, completely forgotten and abandoned. Naruto looked around the lab once more, seeing instructions for high-level poison making, high-level medical techniques, chemistry sets, gas masks, syringes, and then looked to the far wall, where 3 practice dummies were kept, and imagined the faces of his family on them, never looking at him and treating him like a stranger, and he felt his hatred grow further. He looked at the journal in his hand and accepted the fact that he was going to walk down this dark path. He walked to the door and closed it, locking it from the inside. And when he exited the laboratory, he would be a changed person. Chapter 2. Training and the Crazy Snake Lady. Hidden Laboratory Konoha. 5 months after the start of training. Naruto was obsessed. He had learned much in the 5 months he had begun studying in the laboratory. He had learned almost all of the basic poisons from the ingredients he was able to locate from the surrounding forest. He had relentlessly worked on his chakra control with the tree walking and water walking exercises. He now was able to summon 3 shadow clones to train alongside of him. 1 shadow clone would work on chakra control, while the other 2 continued their medical and poison studies. He had finished reading Orochimaru's journal. He was absolutely disgusted by some of the experiments conducted by Orochimaru. Apparently he would experiment on humans and catalog their reactions to his poisons. He learned to prevent queasiness after the first chapter. However, he kept telling himself that he needs to continue this path to continue his dream of revenge. After the first few months of studying Orochimaru's poisons, he was almost glad that Orochimaru had finished his experiments before he was forced out of Konoha. His effort is his benefit. His poisons seemed to have more uses than just killing. He seemed to divide his poisons into 3 categories: fatal, non-fatal, and other use. His fatal poisons were among the most numerous. Ranging from poisons that would kill you upon injection to poisons that could remain docile for days before killing the target. His non-fatal poisons were very wide-ranged. The effects ranged from sleeping drafts to bottled madness, think the berserker poison from AC. Some of the poisons even did the reverse of poisons and seemed to heal the drinker. He wondered if those poisons would be better classified as elixirs. The section that really interested him was the other effects. The section seemed to be dedicated to enhancing the body through poisoning oneself. However, some of the poisons had strong side effects. One even turned the body into a mummified husk after the effects wore off. He decided to not try any of these poisons until he had a much stronger body, mind, and much more chakra control. The journal mentioned that if one constantly poisoned oneself with minor venoms, it could help negate poisoning oneself. His indirect sensei wrote that it would help build up the immune system. He soon found, however, that most minor poisons had almost no effect on him. He assumed this was due to being a half Uzumaki. Abusing this genetic trait, he constantly poisoned himself with minor to medium level poisons, gradually increasing his resistance to different venoms. He had also found several books on sealing in the laboratory. He contemplated learning the art a long time, since it was Minato's specialty. However, as he reviewed some of Orochimaru's greatest works, he realized he would need a good foundation in sealing to accomplish them. Such as the legendary curse seals that were briefly mentioned in the journal. Before he knew it, 5 months had already gone by in the laboratory. He had mastered most of the basics of being a ninja. His chakra control was high genin level. His medical skills were enough to be able to patch up most minor wounds. He had learned to create many of the basic to medium poisons listed in the several texts that Orochimaru left behind. However, he knows that the basics were not enough and that he needed to learn more advanced techniques to defeat his sister. Namikaze Uzumaki estate Konoha 5 months after Naruto left Shio Pav. Shio had learned much from her 4 tutors. She was already starting the basics of Kinjutsu, chakra control, hand seals, and sealing. Despite all of the positive attention from the villagers and her parents, she was not spoiled. Her Ka-san would murder her if she acted like a spoiled clan heiress. However, she still acted arrogant around other children. She deserved to act arrogant because she was better than them. Her two-sen had introduced her to a new chakra control exercise yesterday, the tree walking exercise. She was having a lot of difficulty completing it. Her two-sen always told her that it was because of her large chakra reserves. But she had already gotten halfway up the tree. She bet no one has been able to complete this exercise faster. She knows she will be super strong by the time she is ready for the academy. She would beat down all of the other students and make her way to becoming Hokage. Databeo. Forest of Death Konoha 1 year and 5 months after the start of training Naruto Pav. It had been 1 year since Naruto had mastered the basics. He had grown a little and was now age 7.5. He had changed greatly over the year. Due to lack of sleep and from being around so many poisons, his eyes had lost their pupils. I have no idea if this is possible, but so many Naruto characters don't have pupils, so I assume that is the cause, and his hair had gone from a sunny blonde to an almost white color. Due to careful combing, his hair had gradually lost its signature spikiness, and he had grown his hair in 2 long bangs on the side of his face with a short ponytail. He was now wearing a hooded fur-lined coat, black shinobi pants, black medical wrap around his arms, and dark green shinobi sandals. He carried a satchel lined with storage seals to carry all of his supplies. It's a satchel, not a purse. He also wore a gas mask loose around his neck, almost acting as a face mask as it covered half his face. Thanks to injecting himself with so many poisons, his blood was very toxic. He had discovered this when he had accidentally cut himself and it fell on a rat he was experimenting with. The rat had suddenly started to convulse until it died several minutes later. He had also discovered that due to the toxins in his blood, it was now pure black color. He had created a new identity in the village. He put himself down as an orphan named Menma. He had also signed up for the academy. He had contemplated just leaving the village, but he had nowhere else to go. Iwa would rather kill him than let him join their village. Kumo would put him into a breeding program. Suna was allied with the Leaf. And he didn't even want to think about Kiri with their civil war going on. Besides, how could he gain his revenge against Namikaze's family if he was in a different village? In the present, however, he was searching for rare plants that were required for his latest poison in the Forest of Death. The Forest of Death was named this for a reason, however, due to the toxin in his blood, most predators left him alone because they could smell he was dangerous and inedible. As he continued to walk into a clearing full of nightshade, a beautiful purple plant that looks like lavender, just 10 times more deadly, he jumped back as a kunai flew past him into the ground. He drew a scalpel and injected a little medical chakra into it to allow it to cut easier. As he was preparing for a fight, he heard a female voice laugh mockingly, haha. Does the Ikugaki want to play with me? The little Gaki is not supposed to be here. Naruto looked around cautiously, trying to pinpoint the voice, and spoke in his usual monotone voice. Who are you? The gate was open when I arrived at this forest, so I assumed it was allowed. It was true, the side gate to the forest was wide open when he was trying to break into the forest. From her hiding spot in the trees, Anko Mitarashi sweat-dropped as she had forgotten to lock the gate before she had entered the forest. But she wasn't going to let any Gaki talk back to her. She quickly shooshined right behind the Gaki and pointed a kunai at his cheek, going for full creepiness factor 10. She spoke seductively menacingly in his ear and said, well Gaki, my name is Mitarashi Anko, and you better remember it. Now why don't you tell me who you are and why you are in this forest when it is usually restricted to chunins and jonins? Naruto's eyes widen a bit. Mitarashi Anko is the name of Orochimaru's apprentice in the village. If he played his cards right, this could go very good or very bad. He decided to be at least partially truthful. My name is Menma, and I am searching for rare plants to continue my studies. Anko deadpans at the 7-year-old and goes to creepiness factor 11 and uses her favorite jutsu to summon a snake to scare the kid and chuckled, you're telling me that some brat like you goes into the Forest of Death to find some plants for a science project? Naruto's eyes narrow a bit and started to explain what he was looking for. I'm searching for some nightshade to mix with the venom of the poisonous tree leaves often found in this forest. Anko whistled at the potency of that venom and commented, and what would a Gaki like you want with a poison that could kill a grown man in a few seconds? He smiled slightly and said, it's for my fighting style, I am training myself in poisons and medical jutsu. Anko's eyes widened a bit at that information. He was teaching himself poisons and medical judas. Those two fields were some of the most underestimated fields of being a ninja. Most people just liked flashy ninjutsu or fancy taijutsu. Her eyes gleamed a bit as she looked at the young prodigy. Her creepiness factor was increasing to level 12 as she licked her lips as she stared at Naruto like a predator. He was starting to get a bit nervous as he looked at the gleam in Anko's eyes. He had heard her reputation around the village for being a bit crazy. He started backing away slowly and smiled nervously. Well, I'll go. As he started to walk away, he felt a hand clamp down on his head and he gulped nervously. Standing behind him is a shadowed Anko giggling creepily. Haha, well Gaki, if you want to be a poison user, you can't find a better sensei than me. What most people did not realize about Anko is that she always wanted a student to teach her arts to. She wanted to give a student the chance to succeed that Orochimaru stole from her when he abandoned her with a curse mark. So prepare yourself Gaki, you will be under the supervision of the great and sexy Mitarashi Anko until you graduate from the academy. She dragged him back into the forest laughing the entire way. Naruto's only thought about the situation was how did getting caught in the forest of death lead to this? The academy Konoha initiation ceremony for all new and returning students. Training with Anko sensei was a torture interesting experience. He had thought he had trained hard before, but Anko's training took the cake. She played games in the form of training with him. Outrun the giant snake before it eats you, identify the hidden poison in all of your food, dodge the kunai, and her personal favorite of hide, and don't get caught or you will be stabbed. He can't argue with the results though. His situational awareness level had increased exponentially. He could now be aware of his situation at all times even if he was asleep. In addition, Anko helped him with his toxic blood problem. She had told him it was a side effect of trying to build up one's immune system too fast. She taught him a jutsu that would detoxify his blood when not in battle and would increase its potency during battle. She also taught him the Hibi style of combat which went excellently with his chakra scalpels and poisons. The Hibi style was similar to the Hyuga's gentle fist, except that instead of injecting chakra to one's opponent, the user injects poison through the user's attacks. The style also taught him to be extremely flexible to get into one's guard. Despite the harsh training, they eventually became good friends. Near the end of their training, he told Anko his true heritage. First flashback. It was the final day of training and they were both relaxing in one of the large branches in the forest of death. Anko had brought some sake and dango for them to share, one stick of dango for Naruto and the rest for Anko. Naruto was contemplating whether or not to tell Anko his heritage. She had earned his broken trust during their training and he felt slightly guilty for lying to her. He sighed and began to explain to Anko, hey Anko, I wanted to tell you before our training ends that I haven't been exactly truthful. I am actually the forgotten son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. Anko looked at Menma, his fake name, and laughed, haha, yeah, good one Gaki. She laughed for a bit until she saw his serious face and frowned, wait, you're serious? Menma. Naruto nodded and started to tell her his life story of being forgotten by his parents, finding the laboratory, he did not say who last owned it, to the present. She was stunned at first and became thoughtful for a second. I just don't get it, I've seen the Hokage's family and they act like the perfect family. I am a master of psychology and even I know that parents don't just abandon one kid over the other for a small thing like training one sibling. Menma frowned, he did read some psychology books and his parents did not behave as normal parents would. He pushed those thoughts to the sides and focused back on his ideas of revenge and commented bitterly, I guess they are the exception and they just didn't want a son. Anko patted Menma's shoulder comfortingly and commented, well, it seems we both had sucky childhoods then, well, our training is at an end for now, the academy is starting soon. I know you don't need it, but good luck Gaki. She poofed away in a shushin, taking the remaining dango with her. End of flashback. He sighed and started to walk into the entrance to the academy, ready to finally prove to his family that he is not worthless. Chapter 3. The Academy and Team 9. Konoha Academy. Menma's POV. The opening ceremony for the academy is an honored tradition amongst the shinobi and civilian families. It was a time to meet the teachers, scout potential talent, and hear the Hokage's speech. The adults usually congregated around the teachers, asking questions and reviewing the curriculum for their children. The older students would congregate in their already made groups, while the younger ones met new people and formed new friendships. Menma looked around the festivities, feeling slightly bored. He was not here to make friends or mingle with other students. If coming to the ceremony wasn't mandatory for all new students, he wouldn't have bothered to come. Soon 10 am was approaching and everyone took their seats to hear the Hokage talk. Menma glared at Minato as he took the stage, he barely looked different in the 2 years since he last saw him. As Minato rambled on with his speech of the will of fire and protecting the village, he looked around at the rest of his classmates. It appeared as if at least one of each major clan was attending. He even saw the elusive Kurama clan heiress among the people attending. He had heard of the girl, apparently she had awakened a special bloodline that turned her illusions real, at the cost of creating a separate personality. Though thanks to the quick actions of Kushina and Minato, the alternate personality was sealed and she could become a shinobi. Besides, as Minato's speech ended and they all were called in for the first day of the academy. As they took their seats, the teacher started rambling on about the will of fire and the grand history of Konoha. Besides, this was going to be a long 4 years. Academy. Konoha 4 years after Menma started the academy. It had been 4 long years since Menma had started the academy. It had proved to be a wonderful waste of time for the majority of the day. However, he didn't complain. He knows that the academy was necessary to join the ninja ranks. He had not changed his outfit much in the last 4 years. He now wore a tan-colored trench coat, a gift from Enko, his gas mask on his neck, a black muscle shirt and Anbu-style pants, along with regular shinobi sandals. He was the rookie of the year for all 4 years, much to the chagrin to all of the clan children. People were sometimes comparing him to Minato, who was an orphaned rookie of the year as well. He had not shown all of his abilities during the academy, instead demonstrated himself as a rising prodigy as a mednin and poison specialist. He had revealed Anko's training as a way to cover up the skills he did demonstrate. Right behind his spot is Niji Hyuga, a boy who kept telling him that his success is fate and that he was destined to be rookie of the year. Yeah, he didn't make friends with Niji. However, he surprisingly did make a few friends during his time at the academy. He had made friends with Yakumo Kurama and Rock Lee. Kurama was the Kunoichi of the year and Rock Lee was the dead last. He had already figured out that these were to be his future teammates by reviewing the previous graduating classes. Every year the rookie of the year and the Kunoichi of the year team up with the dead last. He supposed they balanced each other out, a Taijutsu specialist, a Jinjutsu specialist, and a medical poison expert. What he did not know is that in the Hokage's office they were having a meeting about the teams right now. Hokage's office, Minato's POV. All of the potential Jonin senseis were in the room along with the Hokage and academy teachers as they reviewed the graduates of the year. Minato cleared his throat and began the meeting. We have 30 potential graduates this year. I am glad the academy curriculum has managed to produce so many potential ninjas. The academy professors glowed with pride that they were able to teach the next generation. Now let's start with Team 1. They discussed the teams briefly and matched personalities until they arrived at Team 9. Now we have the team of the Rookie of the Year, the Kunoichi of the Year and the Dead Last. The teachers nodded and Haruka Yamino stepped forward with the bios and information from the 3 students. First, the Dead Last. Rock Lee is a very dedicated student but has no ability to wield chakra to produce major ninjutsu or jinjutsu. He is able to do the basic 3 academy jutsu and reinforce his body with chakra, but that's about all he can do. However, he is a very dedicated student and a budding taijutsu master under the tutelage of Mito Guy, who has been training the boy since the 2nd year of the academy. He turned the page on his folder. The Kunoichi of the Year, Yakumo Kurama, is a prodigy in jinjutsu, almost on the level of the missing nin Itachi Uchiha. She is rather weak in taijutsu but is excellent in ranged weaponry, especially when combined with her illusions. He flipped to the final page and finally the Rookie of the Year, Menma, an orphan, but has proved to be a prodigy in poisons and medical ability. He has worked part-time at the hospital during his academy years and the only thing preventing him from being an active medic is his age and lack of chunin status. He is also incredibly skilled in taijutsu with Anko-san's fighting style. He has told me he has had private training with Anko in the past. Everyone shivered at that information except the Kunoichi in question. Poor kid. Haruka put down the folder at the Hokage's desk and Minato perused the information on the 3 students. He found Menma interesting. As an orphan himself, he knew how hard it was to make it to Rookie of the Year without any help. However, it seems like he had a similar relationship with Anko as he had with Uraya. He looked up as the team senseis ended their discussion on who would be best as their sensei. Anko stepped forward along with Guy and Anko spoke seriously. I would like to be sensei of this team. They would make an excellent assassination and escort team with Menma's poison skills, Lee's taijutsu skills, and Yakumo's jinjutsu abilities. She stepped back a bit and Guy started to speak. I would like to be allowed to continue to tutor Rock Lee privately in taijutsu. I do not question Anko's ability to teach him, but he already has a firm foundation in the strong fist fighting style. Minato processed this information. It was a good idea. Anko already had experience with Menma, while the other 2 could benefit from Anko as well. Rock Lee would not be neglected due to Guy's insistence on training him. He nodded and pressed his seal of approval on the team accepted. Team 9 will be composed of Menma, Rock Lee, and Yakumo Kurama. The sensei of the team will be Anko Mitarashi. All of the teachers and future senseis nodded and left the room. Minato frowned and looked down upon Menma's page. He was curious about Menma. What were the chances an orphan would be named after a ramen ingredient like his daughter, Shio? And why did he feel a pang of guilt every time he looked at the face of Menma? What no one else knew is that behind the bars of a large cage in a sewer, a large fox chuckled to himself as he watched Rushio Uzumaki's eyes and waited to see the result of its interference. Kahona Academy Menma's POV. Menma was seated alongside Yakumo and Lee as they waited for the teacher to announce the teams. Soon Haruka Yamino came into the room and took out a sheet of paper and started to list the teams. 1 to 8 unimportant. Team 9 will be Rock Lee, Kurama Yakumo, and Menma. Your sensei will be Mitarashi Anko. Menma smiled slightly as Yakumo and Lee cheered. Team 10 will be Niji Hyuga, Tenten, and Mito Jekko. Your sensei will be Hei Jekko. Haruka set down his papers and smiled at all of the graduates. I have been very glad to be your sensei for these past few years. I hope everyone's dreams come true and that everyone's will of fire will never diminish. Haruka was about to continue before a canopy smashed through the window and attached 2 kunes to the blackboard. On the canopy read the sexy and single Mitarashi Anko. Sensei of Team 9. At the bottom of the canopy stood Anko in a dramatic pose. Alright all you gakas, I want to see Team 9 up on the roof in 5 minutes. She poofed into smoke soon after the announcement, leaving the entire room stunned for a few seconds before Team 9 stood up and made their way up to the roof. Academy roof Menma POV. The trio arrived at the roof to see Anko munching on some dango as she grinned at them. Alright you three, name your names, likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future, that sort of thing. Yakumo looked at Anko's outfit a bit scandalized but spoke in a respectful tone. Shouldn't you introduce yourself first, sensei? Anko grinned again and swallowed the rest of the dango and started her introduction. I am the sexy Mitarashi Anko. My likes are poisons, torture, blood, tea ceremonies, and my cute little gakas. My dislikes are a certain snake, bad dango, bad sake, and arrogant assholes. My hobbies are working at the T&I division and hanging out in the forest of death. My dream is to kill a certain snake. Now it's your turn, Gaki 1. Yakumo looked a little affronted by the nickname but continued anyway. My name is Yakumo Kurama. My likes are genjutsu, painting, and rice bowls. I dislike my alternate personality Ido and a certain person. My hobbies are painting and studying genjutsu. My dream for the future is to be the best genjutsu user in the elemental nations. Anko looked at Lee. Alright and you big brows. Lee jumped excitedly and spoke quickly. Yosh. My name is Rock Lee. I like Taijutsu, Gai Sensei, training, and curry. I do not have many things I hate but I dislike natural-born prodigies. My hobbies are training and making curry, and my dream for the future is to surpass Gai Sensei as a Taijutsu specialist. Anko nodded at that information and turned to Menma, and finally Ugas-kun. Naruto scowled slightly at the nickname but said calmly, my name is Menma, no last name. My likes include poisons, gardening, ramen, and books. My dislikes include a certain family, people who look down on medic nin, and arrogant people. My hobbies are gardening, training, and studying different poisons and their effects. I do not have a dream for the future, but more of an ambition. I plan on becoming the greatest medic nin and poison user in the elemental nations. Anko smiled widely at their introductions and gave them their first instructions. Alright, then my cute little gakas tomorrow, we will have the true genin test at training field 9. Lee looked confused. True genin test, sensei? Anko smirked at Lee. Of course, you didn't think to become full-fledged genin you just needed to just pass a written test and some basic jutsu, did you? Meet me at the field at 8 AM and if you're late it's straight back to the academy. With those words she shoo-shined away in a whirlwind of leaves. Naruto looked at the jutsu and thought to himself, I really have to learn that jutsu. Naruto looked at his potential teammates. We should be well rested for tomorrow, so make sure you go to bed early and eat a good breakfast. Knowing Anko-sensei, this test will not be easy. Yakumo and Lee nodded and they walked off in different directions, each thinking and preparing for the test the next day. Chapter 4. True Genin Exam and D Ranks. Training Ground 9 Kahona Menma's POV. Training Ground 9 was traditional for the Genin Team 9 to practice in. It was a basic training field surrounded by dense forests and an open field in the center that featured as the training ground. It was nearing 6:40 in the morning when Yakumo, Lee, and Naruto arrived at the training ground. They had each come a bit early to plan for the true genin test. Naruto started off the planning. Alright, I have known sensei for quite a while. She is an all-round fighter who uses primarily stealth attacks to kill or injure her opponents. She has the ability to summon snakes to aid her in battle. She is also one of the few poison specialists in the village besides myself. Both Yakumo and Lee nodded at the information, and Yakumo commented, I suggest with the information we have on sensei is to use a distraction. Lee will distract sensei while I layer illusions while Menma finishes her off. Menma nodded at the sound plan. It probably would not work against a jonin like Anko, but it was the best they had. Lee raised his fist to the sky and shouted, Yosh. With the power of youth there is no way we cannot pass this test. Yakumo and Menma sweat dropped. It was clear that he had already been corrupted from Guy. Suddenly he felt a chill as if someone was walking on his grave. He quickly knocked back his teammates and deflected the incoming kunai with a scalpel. Scowling a bit he sighed and spoke out loud to the woods. "Oi, sensei, do you have to throw kunai every time we get together?" Anko shoeshined in front of the group, grinning widely. "Well Gaki, it's good to see you haven't lost your touch in the time we have been away from each other. If you had I would have to beat those skills back into you." Menma shivered a bit knowing she was being completely serious. "What is our test today, sensei?" Anko grew serious and began to explain the test. "I was going to do a special test for you Gakis. However, it is tradition for the 2 rookies of the year and the dead last take the bell test." Anko took out 2 bells and attached them to her waist. "The purpose of this test is to take these bells from me. The person who does not have any part of a bell will return to the academy." All 3 students tensed. It went without saying that there were only 2 bells. Anko grinned evilly at them. "You have until noon, which is in 3 hours, you may begin." All 3 students jumped into the surrounding forest. Anko looked around the forest and smirked. She may not be a censor like Kakashi, but… The green garden snake was staring at Menma from behind. The black snake was staring at Yakumo. The blue snake stared at Lee from the bushes. They can't escape her snakes. Training ground 9 surrounding forest. Menma pav 3 hours until test is over. He knew there has to be some sort of trick to this test. He had reviewed the previous team rosters from the Hokage's personal library. There had never been a 3-member team unless it was for a double apprenticeship, which rarely ever happens. He thought back to Anko's words, "any part of a bell," and he smirked. "Clever sensei, but not clever enough." He jumped through the forest searching for his teammates. Training ground 9 open field. Lee pav 2.45 hours until test is over. "I jumped into the field to confront our sensei. I would not fail Guy sensei and will get a bell, or I will do 500 laps around Konoha on my hands." I arrived at the field and took my stance in front of Anko sensei and smiled widely. "Greetings sensei, I will take one of those bells now." Anko sweat dropped at his loud entrance. "You're not very smart, are you Gaki?" Not answering, Lee dashed at his sensei at high Chunin speeds and jumped in the air in a spinning kick leaf whirlwind. Anko easily dodged the kick and kicked Lee's side as he passed, breaking his spin and tossing him away. Lee jumped up and ran at Anko and was about to punch her when she was replaced by a log. "Kawamari." He though as he looked around for his sensei. However, as soon as he turned around the log poofed and was replaced by Anko, who kicked him in the back into the woods. She quietly chuckled to herself. She never thought that any idiot would confuse Kawamari for Henge. In another dimension. Naruto sneezed. She looked down at a snake in the grass and it whispered information to her. Her grin widened. She knew her favorite Gaki would understand the test. Now they just had to get a bell from her. Training ground 9. Surrounding forest. Menma pav 2 hours till test is over. He had quickly found Yakumo hiding near his location and told her his theory about the test. She had believed him and they quickly went to find Lee. They found him getting his ass kicked by Anko sensei. It was a good thing that she was going easy on him. Last time he made a stupid mistake like that. She had copied Kakashi's 100 Years of Pain with a kunai and explosive tags. They quickly gathered Lee and explained the situation to him. He was quick to agree that they needed to work together and they started to hash out a plan. Menma brought out 2 sealing tags and handed them to his teammates. "We don't have time to make you too immune to my poisons, so wear those on your chest. They will filter out the air and prevent poison from entering your lungs." Ikumo took one of the tags and looked at Menma's gas mask. "Why do you wear that if you have these tags, and when did you learn sealing?" Menma didn't even look sheepish as he stated seriously, "It looks more badass than wearing a sealing tag. Plus those tags do not last forever, these will last around 2 hours max. I learned some sealing from Anko sensei, a lie, but they didn't need to know that. These anti-poison seals are mandatory for any poison user to carry." They both nodded and they started their plan. Training ground 9. Open field. Anko's pav 1 hour until test is over. Anko was standing in the center of the field when 3 syringes flew from the surrounding forest. She quickly dodged them but noticed 3 explosive notes wrapped around them. Shit, she cursed as they exploded. As the smoke cleared, a broken log was on the ground. Menma rushed out into the field with his chakra scalpels activates and rushed at the now revealed Anko in a taijutsu match. He thrust a glowing palm at Anko as she dodged the thrust and retaliated with a high kick to the head. He ducked backwards beneath the kick and sprang up from the ground in a backwards cartwheel, kicking Anko in the chin in the process. As he landed on his feet he jabbed at Anko's exposed throat with his scalpel. However, before he could get near her throat she kneed him in the stomach, then kicked him away from her. She quickly spun around and backhanded Lee, who was about to punch her in the back. Soon she was countering a barrage of taijutsu from Lee and Menma. She smirked a bit and caught both Lee and Menma's fists and spun around, throwing them in opposite directions. "Not bad Gakis, but you're 100 years too early to beat me in close combat." As Menma and Lee were falling, their pain grimaces turned into smirks as a small smoke bomb near Anko's feet exploded. The field suddenly got filled with purple smoke. Anko, who was in the middle of the blast, started coughing a bit and felt her limbs starting to become heavier. As she was coughing, that damn Gaki made a paralyzing poison that can affect me. She quickly went through hand signs and used a wind jutsu to push the poison away from her. As soon as she could see again, Menma was in front of her, a syringe on each finger covered in chakra scalpels. She took out a kunai and channeled chakra into it to deflect the jabs and slashes of Menma's needles. She had to duck as Lee proceeded to do another leaf whirlwind at her back and jumped out of the way as Menma slashed at her with his scalpels. Suddenly she felt a shift in the air as she fluxed her chakra and her two students disappeared and Lee's kick was about to contact to her face while Menma was nowhere to be seen. She bent down unnaturally to dodge Lee's kick and caught a small dart in her hand that was about to enter her neck from behind. Menma emerged from the woods again, his gas mask was on his face and a blowpipe sticking out of a section of the mouthpiece that was previously hidden behind his gas mask. Anko grinned at her two students. Not bad Gakis, but not enough to take me down. Lee was about to charge her again when she pointed her arm at him and yelled Senjutsu, and snakes wrapped around Lee and she dragged him to crash him into Menma, who was charged at her from behind. She chuckled a bit before her eyes widened, her perception had switched, it felt as if she was doing a handstand and looking up at the sky. She smirked a bit, what a nice genjutsu. She closed her eyes and with sound deflected and blocked the attacks from her two students as she continued to flux her chakra to get rid of the genjutsu. Suddenly she opened her eyes as she dispelled the genjutsu and dodged the attacks of her students before kicking them away from her. She smirked a bit as she saw them struggling to get up. What she was not prepared for was when Naruto suddenly shouted now. In the forest, Yakumo had just finished a painting of Anko, locked a bind of steel beams and injected chakra into the painting. In the middle of the field, Anko suddenly froze as she saw steel beams wrapped around her body. Both Menma and Lee rushed to the bells. Anko, unable to free herself from the real illusion, could not react as both bells were taken from her. She smirked as all three of her students stood in front of her, all smiling while Lee and Menma had the bells. She looked at all three of her students. Alright you Gakis, Lee and Menma have a bell, so it looks like Yakumo is going back to the academy. Menma smirked a bit and used his chakra scalpel to cut his bell in half and gave it to Yakumo. You never said we could not split the bell, sensei. And besides, this test is not about getting the bells but working together. Anko started laughing loudly. Hahaha. I can't wait to see Kakashi's face when he learns that my students passed his precious bell test. You were right Menma, the point of this test was teamwork. I am proud of all of you, my cute little students. But for now I need to report the results to the Hokage. Why don't you all treat yourself to something nice for lunch while I do that? She poofed away in a shunshin. All three genin members grinned at each other. Lee was shouting about youth and how he made Guy sensei proud. Yakumo was glowing with happiness that she proved her old sensei Kurenai wrong and became a genin. Menma smirked to himself as he took off his gas mask. He was now a genin 1 year before his sister. He could not wait to finally show his former parents what he could do by defeating his sister. Menma turned to his teammates and smiled a bit. Why don't we go out for some sushi? If we all pitch in we can get some of the good stuff. They all smiled to each other again and walked to his favorite sushi bar. Hokage meeting. Konoha 1 hour after the successful genin test. All of the jonin senseis that had already tested their students came into the room to discuss their results to their Hokage. Soon when all of the senseis were gathered they announced their results. Team 1. Failed. Team 2. Failed. Team 3. Failed. Team 4. Failed. Team 5. Failed. Team 6. Failed. Team 7. Inoku Yamanaka, Choju Akimichi, and Shiori Nara passed. Team 8. Bakura Aburam, Hibiki Izanaka, and Tajiro passed. Now it was Anko's turn. Team 9. Rock Lee, Kurama Yakumo, and Menma passed. Finally Hayato walked forward and said. Team 10. Mito Jekko, Niji Hyuga, and Tenten passed. Minato nodded smiling, 4 teams had passed this year, which is 1 more than the usual amount of students to graduate. He also noticed that Team 9 had passed. He knew that team had been given the bell test and he was curious to see how they did. Thank you everyone for your hard work. I will be seeing the senseis of the past teams here tomorrow for your first D rank assignments. I would like Anko to stay behind for a few seconds please. Everyone nodded and looked at Anko confused as they left the room. Minato picked out the files of Team 9. I wanted to hear your opinion of this team. It is rare that a bell test is passed. The bell test was notorious for having the highest number of failures. It was for this reason that it was reserved for only for the team with the rookie and Kunoichi of the year. Anko nodded. Yes Hokage-sama, I believe that this team can be a very strong fighting force in the future. Lee and Menma were keeping me on my toes with their taijutsu and poisons, while Yakumo kept me cornered with their genjutsu. If I was high Chunin or even low Jonin I may have lost the battle, not just the bells. Minato looked a bit surprised, after all it's rare to see a genin team have so much potential. He looked at the folders and couldn't help feeling pride for Menma, but he was not sure why. He looked back at Anko and smiled. Thank you Anko-san, I will see you tomorrow to hand out your first D ranks. Anko smiled evilly and laughed, can't wait to see the looks on the Gaku's faces, then they first do D ranks. She continued to chuckle evilly out the building, scaring to death the people she passed through the building. Okage's office Konoha one day after the genin test Menma Pav. Team 9 and their sensei were waiting for their first mission as a team. They were all excited for their first mission. They were standing in front of the Chunin who gave out D and C ranked missions. The Chunin sorted through the D rank scrolls until he pulled out a mission. Team 9, the Daimo's wife's cat Tora has gone missing, it is your job to retrieve it. All of the genins on Team 9, even Lee, deadpanned at the Chunin. Menma sighed, already expecting this from seeing all of the genin teams do meaningless tasks around the village. After several hours of chasing the damn cat they returned to the office, heavily battle-wounded by the smug-looking cat in Yakumo's arms. The Chunin chuckled a little bit after they completed the mission and took a look at the remaining scrolls. Well, the only missions we have left for the day are weeding Miss Haruka's garden, repainting an elder's house. Outside the room they could hear a commotion and a woman's voice yelling shrilly, "No. Tora." The Chunin sighed and catching Tora again. Team 9 sighed as one as they accepted another D rank. Training Field 9 Konoha 1 month after Team 9's first D rank. It was an entire month of hell for Team 9. In the morning they would constantly train with Anko and then do boring D rank missions for the rest of the day. It was not until after their 40th D rank mission that Anko had them gather at Training Ground 9. Anko faced her team. Alright Gakus, tomorrow we are going on our first C rank mission. I want all of you to get a good night's sleep tonight and be well prepared for the mission. We will probably not be back for a week or two. The three genins looked excited and nodded as they left to prepare for their first real mission. Menma arrived at his apartment that he had bought with his money from the D rank missions. He looked at the mirror for a bit before wiping the makeup off his cheeks, revealing 3 whisker-like marks. He did not know why he was gaining these marks. Only his sister had these marks and she was the Kyuubi container. However, until he figured out what was happening he would keep these marks hidden. Besides, only 2 more months until the Chunin exams. He knows he can't partake in the exams. He knows that Minato would never let his daughter not partake in the first Chunin exams after she graduates. He was in luck, the next Chunin exams was in Kumo. He could make an easy argument not to take the exams this time. He also figured out that Niji's team would not participate because of the history between the Hyugas and Kumo. He smiled grimly, it was just a matter of time before he faces against his sister. And at the end of it, he would be the one standing over her and gaining his revenge by humiliating that man's daughter in front of the entire world. Inside Menma's mindscape. Menma's mindscape had taken the form of a large pond surrounded by trees. In the center of the water 2 glowing red eyes appeared, slowly taking shape from the water. Finally a small fox with one tail emerged from the water and smirked. The chakra he had injected into the kid had finally managed to allow his consciousness and was finally large enough. Before he was sealed in the brat Shio he had injected some of his chakra into the other kid, Naruto something. He had used that little chakra to place a genjutsu around anyone of his blood to ignore him. This allowed his plan to succeed. Without his consciousness in the seal, the Juubi could never be revived unless both his consciousness and chakra were in the Jito Meizo statue. It was just an added bonus that he could gain his revenge against all the years chained to a giant moon in Kushina's mindscape. He looked at his small body in disdain, he would grow fast from the excess chakra in his new host's body. However, he would not be at full strength until Naruto reaches the age of 16. He slightly regretted making the kid's life so bad, but in order to defeat Madara the deception was necessary. However, the kid had grown strong away from his parents and with his chakra they could train to defeat Madara while Shio will be the bait. He knew that Naruto would be a better host because only he knew that he was the reincarnation of Asura, not Shio. He chuckled and delved back into the pond, knowing that it wasn't time to reveal himself to Naruto no Menma yet. Chapter 5. Death of Spandex and the Butcher. Moritomo Sushi Bar Konoha 6:30 am Menma Pav. Menma was sitting with Lee and Yakumo at their favorite sushi bar as they discussed their first C rank. Menma finished a fatty tuna sashimi before he spoke. The mission will most likely along the lines of escort or assassination. Anko already told us that's what our team was built towards. Yakumo gulped a bit. I can't believe we will really have to kill already. I know we have learned about it during the academy, but the actual knowledge that you're about to do it's scary. Lee nodded solemnly. Yes, it will be harsh blow to our youthfulness, but it is required to become stronger as ninja. Menma chewed a bit more before looking around. I wonder why our sensei called us here, our C rank isn't for another 4 hours. Anko arrived at their booth and sat down, stealing a salmon shishim from Menma. Well Gaki, we are here for a very important mission that could be critical to our survival in the future. All three genins gulped a bit as they heard that. Anko suddenly tied Lee up, we are getting rid of this spandex and getting you a real ninja outfit. All of the genins and some of the other diners at the restaurant sweat dropped. Lee suddenly started stuttering BB, but Anko-sensei, Guy said that this outfit will increase my youthfulness and unlock my full potential. Anko started dragging Lee out of the restaurant, chuckling a little bit. The only thing that outfit will increase if your chances of death on an assassination mission. Menma and Yakumo quickly paid for their meal and ran after his sensei and unfortunate teammate. They found the master and unfortunate student at a popular clothing store for shinobi, where Lee was still tied up crying crocodile tears as Anko picked out an outfit. Soon she picked out an outfit and Sparta kicked Lee into the room after untying him and gave him the outfit for him to wear. Soon he came out of the dressing room and everyone gaped at Lee. He was wearing a dark green tight latex sleeveless muscle shirt with black shinobi pants, combat boots, and arm guards with latex fingerless gloves underneath. Think Lancer's clothing from Fate Zero. Anko grinned smugly as her choice in outfit was definitely the right one. Anko grabbed Lee and rushed out of the store while yelling now to the barber shop. Menma and Yakumo chased after the rapidly disappearing duo. Soon they arrived at the Konoha barber shop and entered to see Lee tied to one of the chairs and surrounded by evilly chuckling barbers. Menma deadpanned at his sensei, what is going on here? Anko grinned down at Menma, well it seems that they have been wanting to destroy that horrid bowl cut and eyebrows of his ever since they saw him on the streets a few times. They said he was on their headhunting board. She pointed to a wall where there were a bunch of photos of different men. On top of the wall said targets. Some of the most predominantly displayed were Kakashi Haddock, Jiraiya of the Sannin, and Mito Guy. Underneath Guy there was a picture of Rock Lee crossed out with a red marker. After 30 minutes a new Lee was revealed. They had trimmed his eyebrows so his eyes did not look so wide anymore. His hairstyle was now wavy in places with one strand of hair going down his forehead, Lancer's hairstyle. Both Menma and Yakumo gaped at Lee, where had the weirdo green beast go? Lee looked forlornly at his green spandex suit in his hands and looked at Anko-sensei, are you sure this will allow me to become a better ninja and expand my youthfulness? Anko grinned at Lee, sure kid, that outfit will definitely help you become a ninja. Suddenly Lee's face brightened and he shouted, yes sensei. I will become a strong ninja with this new look, if I don't I will do 1000 laps around Konoha. Menma smirked a bit, there he is. Hokage's office. Konoha Menma Pav. Team 9 were standing in front of the Hokage's desk. Minato sat behind the desk along with two Chunin helpers and was looking at a few scrolls in a box labeled C rank. However, before he could pull out a mission, Anko stepped forward. Hokage-sama, I would like to request a hunt. A hunt was a group of missions set aside to allow genin teams used to killing. These missions usually involved destroying bandit camps around the Land of Fire. Minato raised his eyebrows and looked over at the determined team. He saw no hesitation among the genin inside. He always hated this part of being Hokage, forcing young kids to make their first kill. He looked at Team 9. Alright then, your mission will be to destroy the bandit camp that was reported outside of the small town of Kixiang, near the border of the Land of Earth. Do not worry about Iwa Shinobi, we have a peace agreement with them, so if you encounter any they are unlikely to engage. The mission should take around 2 weeks to complete. Team 9 nodded and excited the room to prepare for their first C rank. Menma's apartment, Konoha. Menma finished packing his supplies. He was bringing 2 changes of clothes, food and preservation seals, around 100 different vials of poison with labeled effects, his medical equipment, kunai, shuriken, senbon, darts, and some small arrows for his latest weapon. He rolled the sleeve of his trench coat a bit and looked at the device Anko had gifted him with. Flashback 2 weeks ago. Menma Pav. Menma was practicing a water ninjutsu exercise given to them by Anko-sensei. She had tested their affinities and Lee had lightning, Yakumo had earth, and he had water. Anko had commented that despite not being able to do jutsu, Lee could still produce nature chakra and could eventually infuse his punches and kicks with lightning chakra similar to the Reikage. Anko had Yakumo practicing some defensive earth-style ninjutsu. She had informed him that his water attacks could be a good combination with his poisons. Many poisons can become more toxic when exposed to water or evaporate in the air when upon contact to it. She had him practicing the water gunshot technique, which was the opposite of the fireball jutsu and water prison jutsu. Both were basic C-rank water ninjutsu but could be used very effectively with his poisons. However, before any of them could use the jutsu effectively they needed to train in their elements. She gave Lee a leaf and told him when it was crumpled into a small ball, he would be given the next step. Yakumo had to turn her leaf completely into ash, while he had to extract all of the water from the leaf. He was around the midway point of extracting the water before the leaf crumpled, proof that he messed up again. He sighed and looked up as Anko walked up to them carrying 3 scrolls. Team 9 stopped their training exercise and approached Anko. Sensei gave 1 scroll to each of us and explained Gaki's good news. Your wonderful and sexy sensei has decided to gift all of you with a weapon. For Lee, I asked Guy to give you one of their nunchucks. Lee's eyes widened. The Mito family was famous for their nunchuck wielders. It was said that Mito Bruce was able to go head to head with the second Hokage with nothing but a pair of his nunchucks. Lee unsealed the 2 nunchucks and spanned them around a bit before grinning widely. For Yakumo, this is a joint project between Menma and I. She unsealed a tanto and handed it to Yakumo. This dagger is imbued with a mix of several different poisons that will kill a grown man in around a minute with a scratch. And finally for Menma. She unsealed a very odd crossbow. It was small and attached to a fingerless glove. The glove seemed to have a reloading device that would automatically reload the crossbow. Anko grinned a bit. This little beauty is an item I found a few years ago at a random shop in the land of snow. The bolts loaded into it are unpoisoned, but she handed him a quiver of small arrows. You can poison whatever you want on these, which you can load manually. Menma nodded and put on the contraption. He looked around and noticed a target a few meters away. He pointed the arm-mounted crossbow and fired rapidly at the target, each hitting in the inner circle. He gave a small smile and thanked his sensei. Thanks sensei, this is great. Anko saw the small smile and smirked. It was hard to get that kid to smile. Then flashback. At 1 p.m. all the members of Team 9 arrived at the gate and greeted each other. Soon their sensei arrived and they jumped into the forest at high speeds, each mentally preparing for what they're about to do. Forest surrounding Qixiang. 12 p.m. Northern Land of Fire. 3 days since Team 9 set out from Konoha and Mapov. Team 9 was hiding in the trees looking over the bandit camp. The camp was hidden in a clearing surrounded by trees north of Qixiang. They were discussing their plan to wipe out the bandits. Anko began to tell them the plan. Alright, I want Yakumo to maintain a genjutsu around the camp to prevent their escape and to remain undetected. Menma, spread your poison gas around the camp. Lee, when Yakumo and Menma complete their tasks I want you to go in and start killing the guards. Then we will all enter at the 3 entrances to the camp to kill the rest of the bandits. Everyone nodded. Yakumo's pav. I got into position at the east entrance and quickly began to go through some hand seals and whispered Temple of Nirvana. Soon all of the guards around the camp saw feathers in front of their eyes and fell asleep. Menma pav. He crouched upon the largest tree at the southern entrance and manually inserted a syringe into his crossbow and fired them to critical spots around the bandit camp. Soon the camp was littered with syringes. Lee's pav. Lee arrived at the west entrance to the bandit camp and took out his nunchucks and breathed deeply before activating a seal on his tongue to filter out the air from the poison. Enko's pav. She stood silently away from the camp observing their progress and was impressed. These Gakas were doing pretty well on their first time. She frowned and looked a bit to the north. Her snakes had picked up a large man approaching the camp they were about to attack and she was worried. Menma's pav. Menma fromed a hand seal and whispered Katsu. And all of the syringes he launched into the camp exploded with a noxious purple gas throughout the camp. He quickly put on his gas mask before running into the camp to help Lee, who was already battling some of the coughing bandits. He rolled under a wild swing by a bandit and shot him with a crossbow bolt before peppering the bandits around Lee with arrows. Not to waste arrows, he quickly activated his chakra scalpels and started to kill more bandits. Lee's pav. Spinning his nunchucks around at startling speeds, he broke bones and necks of bandits around him as he entered the camp like a whirlwind, striking at any bandit he could see and avoiding any of the wild strikes of the bandits, coughing from the poison in the air. Yakumo pav. Grabbing the tanto from the sheath on her left shoulder, she quickly entered the camp, cutting any bandit that got too close to her as she started to seal any supplies and stolen goods the bandits had. She would return all of the stolen items to the village after this was over. Menma pav. Soon no bandits remained and bodies were littered around the camp. He closed his eyes a bit as he heard Lee and Yakumo throw up in the forest after their first skills. He knew he should feel worse about killing for the first time. But a part of his humanity died a long time ago when he first picked up Orochimaru's journal. He wished he felt worse about killing the bandits. But all he felt inside was a hollowness that he couldn't describe. He felt a hand on his shoulder and he flinched before opening his eyes and saw Anko with a hand on his shoulder. You okay, Menma? In the back of his mind he realized this was the first time she had called him by his name instead of Brother Gaki. He nodded slowly. I will be fine, it will just take a bit to get used to. Anko nodded, understanding. However, before they could leave back to Konoha, Anko suddenly grabbed us and sushied out of the way as one of the largest men that he had ever seen slammed a huge mace on the ground, cracking it heavily and kicking up a bunch of dust. When the dust settled, the man was revealed to Team 9. He was a giant of a man at 7 feet tall and was heavily muscled. He had scraggly dark brown hair and a large beard. He carried a large two-handed mace with an anvil-sized head. On his forehead was the symbol of Iwa with a slash crossing it. He chuckled deeply at their ready stances, so 4 tree huggers think they can beat me. Anko narrowed her eyes. Rogan the Butcher, a rank missing nin known for slaughtering entire towns in the Land of Fire during the last war. Went rogue a couple of years ago since Hitsuchikage signed the peace treaty. What are you doing in this area? Behind her back she made a few hand signs to her team. Rogan grinned darkly. I was just about to have fun in the town nearby. I heard there was a bunch of scum living there and I wanted to clean it up. But here I am with a bunch of newborn genin ninjas and a Horikonoha Kunoichi. This will be fun. With those words he lifted his mace and quickly swung it at me. I jumped away from the mace firing bolts from my crossbow at high speed, but most of the arrows were deflected as he spun his mace around. We all charged at Rogan, but he simply grinned again and started spinning around with his mace, forcing us all to get back before we were clubbed. He stopped spinning suddenly and kicked Yakumo away from him into the woods harshly. Lee yelled Yakumo. Before having to dodge a fast swing by Rogan, but ended up getting backhanded by him straight into a tree and was knocked out. I quickly went through some hand seals and used one of the few ninjutsu he learned from Orochimaru's notes. He cupped his hands together and converted some of his chakra into poison, and a small black ball appeared between his hands, and he shouted Dakujin no Jutsu. And a large blast of black smoke appeared from his hand straight at the butcher. Rogan saw the cloud and quickly went through some hand seals and clapped his hands together. A wall of earth separated him from the poison cloud. As the cloud hit the wall started to dissolve. Rogan quickly charged at Menma with his anvil. Menma activated his chakra scalpels, and Anko drew 2 longer than normal kunai, and they engaged him into jutsu. They were locked in combat for around 2 minutes before Rogan slammed the handle of his mace into Anko's stomach before knocking her out with another hit from his mace. Seeing his sensei fall made something snap inside of Menma. He unsealed a syringe from a seal on his wrist and injected it into his arm. Rogan was confused as Menma injected something into himself. Time seemed to slow and all Menma could hear was a heartbeat steadily speeding up. He started frothing at the mouth a bit and his eyes turned pure white. Rogan looked a bit alarmed at this development and charged at Menma, preparing to strike him down before he finished whatever he was doing. However, as he struck the genin his mace hit blackened skin and his mace was stopped dead. Soon this darkness was spreading all across Menma until he was completely covered except his eyes, and a jagged smile played across the thing's mouth. The poison that he injected himself with was one of Orochimaru's more brilliant creations. He took the venom of the chakra eater. A special type of mosquito that injects its poison into its victim that absorbs its chakra. He took a syringe full of it and injected it with the chakra of several bestial creatures from the forest of death. He also mixed it with the venom of the fossilized snake, a snake that hardens the chakra system with its venom when it bites an opponent. When injected into a human, the results are what is displayed. The venom causes chakra to harden in the chakra pathways and allows the human body to become invulnerable and have the senses and fighting instinct of a predator. In exchange, one has no control over their body until the effect wears off. Rogan was hard-pressed to do anything against the bestialized Menma as he constantly guarded the clawed attacks of Menma. Soon several cuts and scrapes dotted the butcher. Menma fought like a beast, constantly scratching, cutting, and biting at Rogan until eventually the man's mace missed and he cut the Misinnin's throat open. Rogan spluttered a bit and died looking at the roaring and victory face of his killer. Soon the effects of the enhancer wore off and Menma fell to the ground, exhausted. He looked at his skin and noticed it was not purple. He had read that a side effect of the enhancer was that the last test subject, some guy called Mundo, was purple for a month after the poison was injected into him. He looked at his sensei and crawled to her, and his hands started to glow green. He healed her to the best of his ability, then passed out from chakra exhaustion. Inside Menma's mindscape. Ayubi looked through Menma's eyes. He fought Rogan. He was impressed despite himself as he saw the boy fight a jonin. As a reward for the kid, he decided to use a little of his corrosive chakra to prevent any negative side effects of the stuff he injected himself with. He looked around the pond a bit and looked at an hourglass on the shore of the lake. His illusion over the Namikaze family would not last for much longer than a year. He sighed a bit and prepared to meet his new container at the end of the year. He hoped the kid would forgive him for his deception. Chapter 6. The Truth and the Summoning Contract. Xiang Land of Fire. One day after the battle, Menma Pav. It was a bright morning when Menma slowly opened his eyes. He winced at the bright light hitting his eyes from the window as he sat up in bed, warily looking around him. He was in a modest but comfortable hotel room. Soon after he woke up, Anko entered the room with a tray of breakfast. He saw the food and his stomach growled. He realized he was very hungry. Anko sat down near him and he asked through eating his eggs what happened. Are Yakumo and Lee alright? Anko nodded yes. Yakumo was lucky, she fell into some mud and it cushioned her fall a bit. As for Lee, he woke up a few hours before you did, seeing how he is currently running around the village he appears to be fine. I woke up around 30 minutes of being unconscious, you shouldn't use your chakra so recklessly to heal me, Brad. You were suffering from severe chakra exhaustion. I'm surprised you're up already. But. Anko suddenly turns deadly serious, making Menma gulp a bit. What the hell was that poison you took? I found the needle sticking out of your arm and found Rogan looking as if an animal attacked him. Menma looked away from Anko. It was a steroid that I created. Anko looked a bit angry. Bullshit, I know what we have worked on together, and that steroid was way too advanced for a rookie genin to completely demolish one of the highest ranked A rank missing nin in the bingo book. The only reason that man was not S rank is because he is only wanted in Konoha and Iowa. A little known fact about becoming S rank in the bingo book is that you need to be wanted at A rank by 3 different ninja villages. Menma sighed a bit, contemplating what to do. He knew this may make her hate him, but he owed her the truth. He unzipped his trench coat and pulled down his shirt to show a seal on his heart and unsealed Orochimaru's journal. He handed it to Anko. Anko took the journal and started flipping through it, getting angrier as she continued to read the experiments that her former mentor conducted. She looked up, more angry than he had ever seen her. What the hell, Gaki, where did you find this? This is one of Orochimaru's personal journals. Menma winced a bit at her tone. When I was locked out of the Namikaze estate, I found one of Orochimaru's hidden laboratories near a training ground I used. I had just decided to get revenge on my former family, but I had no one to train me. I had no resources, no mentor and no allies, so I decided to learn from his journals. Anko's angry expression softened a bit. Menma, you can't just live your life for revenge. I have seen people, including my former mentor, walk that path. All of them either ended up dead or a worse monster than the person they wished revenge on. Anko hugged Menma as a mother would. Menma, no, Naruto, you do not need to become a monster like my former sensei. A good friend of mine once told me that in order to become truly strong, you need something precious to fight for. Revenge isn't something precious to you. It is just an empty emotion of hatred that will continue to corrupt you. When your revenge is complete, you're left with nothing but more hatred. Mentally, she was thanking the third Hokage for telling her this after she was abandoned by Orochimaru, or she would have no clue what to say to this kid. For the first time since he was 5, Naruto felt tears running down his face as he was hugged for the first time in his memory. He thought back to all the times he was forgotten by his family and how they doted on Shio. He still felt the burning hatred for his former family. But he then thought of Lee, Yakumo and Anko, and he felt happy for the first time in a long time. He smiled, a true warm smile. He would be the best of both worlds. He would prove to his former family that he was better than Shio, but he would not do it Orochimaru's way. He would become powerful and protect his precious people. He wrapped his arms around Anko and said softly, "Thank you, Ka-san." Anko smiled a bit. "No problem, brat." Exit of Qixiang, land of fire. Menma's POV. Team 9 was preparing to leave Qixiang when 4 Iowa shinobi jumped down in front of them. Team 9 quickly got into fighting stances, but the leader raised his hand. "Hold, we are not here to fight." Anko didn't loosen her guard and spoke, "What are you doing here then?" The leader of the Iowa group stepped forward a bit. He was a tall man with a rather large nose. He was dressed in the formal Iowa Jounin outfit. He stopped a good distance from their group. "My name is Katsuchi, Jonin of Awagakure with my genin team, Kuritsuchi, Akatsuchi and Suzumabachi Kamizuro. We had heard that Rogan the Butcher was in the area and came to take him out, but it seems that we were too late." Anko nodded and relaxed a bit. "Yes, my genin team, and I defeated Rogan." Katsuchi looked a little impressed as he observed the 3 genin. "Yes, and I would like to thank you on behalf of Iowa for his death. However, we would like to request that you return the hammer of the first Tsuchikage to us. Rogan had stolen it before he went rogue." Anko looked surprised. "The hammer of the first Tsuchikage? The Diamondolm? We did not know that he was carrying such a renowned weapon. I would have thought he would have used some of its abilities." Katsuchi nodded. "The hammer has seals to prevent the unworthy of using it. You may keep the body of Rogan, he is rightfully yours to cash in the bounty." Anko took out the scroll they had sealed the hammer in and handed it to Katsuchi. The Iowa Jounin unsealed the mace and inspected it a bit before nodding and sealing it back into the scroll. He looked at the group. "That Tsuchikage will hear of this. It will definitely help ease some of the tensions after the peace treaty to hear that a Konoha team returned one of our greatest relics of the first Tsuchikage." Anko nodded. The Iowa team departed, but Menma noticed the girl Kuritsuchi look at him speculatively before jumping away with the rest of her team. Anko sighed in relief. That was Katsuchi, the Great Earth Shaker. He is an S-class ninja of Iowa and slated to become the next Tsuchikage. During the last war he was famous for remodeling an entire forest into an earthen terrain for his allies. We were lucky they weren't hostile or we would have stood no chance. The genins shivered, for their usually unflappable sensei to be wary spoke volumes of that man's skill. Menma looked at the sun which was approaching noon. "Well, we need to report this to the Hokage, so let's head back as quickly as possible." Everyone nodded and they jumped into the forest heading at full speed back to Konoha. Okage's office Konoha 3 days after the events at Kixiang Minato's POV. Minato deadpanned at the report in his hands. How did a C rank turn into an encounter with a high A rank missing nin, and then an encounter with the S-class Iwa Jonin Kitsuchi? He sighed. Well, I am glad that no one was injured during this mission. I am also proud that you three defeated Rogan the Butcher, the bounty on his head will be split among the four of you. He smiled a bit. I also want to thank you for returning that weapon back to Iwa. I have already been sent a message from the Tsuchikage with a thank you and the information that he is sending a Genin team to the next Chunin exams in Konoha. This is the first time Iwa has participated in a Chunin exam sponsored by the village since the system was made. Enko grinned. All in a day's work, Hokage-sama. He deadpanned at the Jonin sensei. I hope it isn't a daily thing, you were very lucky this time. However, due to the unforeseen variables in this mission I bumped it up to A rank and you will earn the appropriate pay alongside the bounty of Rogan. Congratulations. Ikumo and Lee cheered while Menma smirked. The pay of an A rank mission would cover his living expenses for the next year. Konoha Street 6 months later. Menma's POV. The information that a Genin team had killed the infamous Rogan the Butcher spread like wildfire throughout the village. Rogan was one of the most hated Iwa shinobi from the last war. To hear that a Genin team managed to kill him made them pretty well known throughout the village. Soon they got into the habit of training with Enko, doing some D ranks and the occasional C rank. However, none of their C ranks were as exciting as their first one. They had skipped the Chunin exams in Kumo along with Team 10. They heard that Team 7 and 8 disbanded due to 2 deaths and some promotions, leaving the spots open for this year's graduating class. Currently he was spying on this year's graduating class. He wanted to scout out the competition and potential allies of the next generation. He also wanted to see the progress of his former sister. He noticed a few potential threats in the class. Uchiha Sasuke was the shinobi of the year at the moment, while his sister, Uzumaki Namikaze Shio, was the rookie and Kinwaichi of the year. The dead last of their generation was an Inuyasha member named Kiba, the younger brother to the clan heiress. The day for their class it seemed as if they were demonstrating ninjutsu. Sasuke did a fireball jutsu, as expected of an Uchiha member, it was their calling card after all. Kiba did his clan jutsu Fang over Fang. Most of the academy students did simple henges or bushin no jutsus. When it was finally Shio's turn she went through some hand seals and bit her thumb and yelled Kuchius no jutsu. And she appeared standing on a large frog. He froze, staring at the sight of the frog. He had known that Shio would eventually summon frogs. But he had figured that she would not be given the contract until she was Chunin at least. He frowned angrily, he could not beat his sister if she had an entire clan of toads to back her up. Minato had held down the Kyuubi with the boss summon of the Toad clan, he would stand no chance. He dashed to his hidden training grounds thinking deeply. He needed a summoning contract, that was for sure. However, the only contracts that he knew of in Konoha were the Nara clan's deer summoning contract, the Akimichi's butterfly contract, the tortoise contract of the Mito clan, and the toad contract belonging to his former family and Jiraiya of the Sannin. He frowned again, trying to summon without a contract is incredibly dangerous. However, if one managed to gain a summoning contract through this method they're bound to get stronger. Many famous shinobi who had passed the test of their most naturally aligned clans became extremely famous ninjas. The best examples of this would be the 3 Sannin, each now S-rank ninjas. He knew he would not stand a chance against the Toad clan, even if he was more powerful than their summoner. Feeling a steely resolve settle over him he left to find his sensei. Enko's apartment. Knocking on the door Menma waited for Enko. His sensei opened the door and looked at him annoyed. What do you want Gaki, there is no training for this week. He nodded. I know sensei, I just wanted to inform you I am going to do some solo survival training in the Forest of Death for the next week and I will not be in contact. Enko nodded. Be careful Gaki, the tigers are a bit frisky since it's close to mating season. Menma nodded before running to the forest. When he was far enough in he breathed in a bit to calm himself. Summoning without a contract is not illegal, but he would be the first unsponsored orphan to attempt this. All of the past people to summon animals without a contract either had special training from a clan or a high-ranking jonin. He went through the hand seals he had memorized from Shio and bit his thumb before saying quietly Kuchius no jutsu. With that he disappeared in a plume of smoke. Uncount Forest Menma POV. Menma crouched down on the ground as he arrived looking around the area cautiously. The area he had landed on seemed to be pretty similar to the Forest of Death. He assumed he had summoned himself into a land creature's domain, so that removed sea creatures or any type of bird. The area also did not look like a swamp, so that removed reptiles. He looked around a bit more, expecting to see some overly large animal appear from the forest, but he could see nothing. What he did not know is that he is being watched at the moment. All around the forest tiny eyes peered at him as they considered the latest potential summoner. They had not had a potential contract holder for centuries. Menma continued to walk down the only path in the forest. He still did not see any potential summoning animal. He saw several insects, small animals, but none that seemed to be summonable. He pulled his larger crossbow from his back. He had bought this weapon from the latest shipment of weapons from the land of snow. The weapon ran on chakra and could reload arrows extremely quickly. He had made the weapon even more deadly by poisoning all of the arrows. Eventually he reached a clearing with an extremely large spider web. The web was constructed to look like a small city and was crawling with hundreds upon hundreds of spiders in different sizes. Some were as large as trucks while others the size of his fingernail. He put on his gas mask and cautiously approached the nest, wary of any potential attack. As he passed, many of the spiders turned to look at him curiously, or at least he thought it was curiously. It was hard to tell their emotions. Soon he arrived the center of the nest where a large throne was erected. He was confused, why would a throne be here that was meant for a humanoid person? Before he could walk further, hundreds of spiders converged on the throne, seemingly merging into a human. Soon the blob of spiders gained color and the person was revealed. She was a tall woman with flowing black hair, eyes that instead of a pupil had a classic spiderweb pattern. She wore a black dress with spiderweb pattern straps, a Ratchan soul eater. The lady smiled motherly at Menma and put a black fan in front of her mouth as she spoke. It has been so long since a human has entered this realm. We have been waiting so long for a true summoner of our race. He stared at the being in front of him. Who are you? I doubt you are human if you are here. The woman didn't seem offended. No, I am not. My name is Ratchan, the collective consciousness of all the spiders of this realm. He felt his eyes widened. So you are the hive mind of all of these spiders? Ratch nodded yes, only a few of the spiders here have true awareness like other summoning creatures. However, an advantage of this is that I can control any spider, not only of this realm. For example, I know that your family abandoned you. I know where each member of your family is. I even know that your mentor, Anko, burned her dinner last night and was forced to eat out. He gapped such an information gathering ability. If what she was saying is true, she had the power to see through the eyes of every spider on Earth. That would outstrip any sensing ability he had ever heard of from anyone. He gulped a bit before becoming serious. What is your challenge to becoming a summoner of the Spider Clan? The woman tapped her chin and thought. The Spider Clan had never had a test for their summoner because no one had ever wanted her contract. She looked at the young man before her. She knew everything about him that she saw through her spiders. She knew he was a driven young man that would become very powerful in the future. She licked her lips a bit and spoke. I know almost your entire life, Menma, or should I say Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I know how powerful you can be in the future. Your fighting style is very similar to ours as well. I will give you the summoning contract. I wanted to gape at how easy that was, but I retained control over my emotions this time. I thank you, Queen Arach. Could you please explain the abilities of your contract? Arach nodded. The spider contract is not one of the most powerful contracts in terms of open combat, but in terms of subversion, intelligence gathering, and assassination, we are unparalleled. We are able to locate and listen to any conversation where a spider can access. Finally, we can teach you our brand of Senjutsu. I couldn't help but widen my eyes at the last bit of information. Senjutsu was only from the most rare of contracts. Each clan had their own brand of Senjutsu. From what he read from Minato's notes is that the Toad clan boosts one's abilities by a factor of 10. He looked at Arach seriously. What is the purpose of your Senjutsu? Arach smiled her motherly smile and explained. Our last summoner, Elise, was able to turn into a rather impressively large black widow spider. She gained the ability to access the collective consciousness of the spiders like I am able to. Finally, she gained the ability to use acid-based attacks. I believe she called it acid release. He thought of the possibilities of those powers. By being able to turn into a large spider would be extremely useful in combat. By entering the consciousness of every spider, his sensory ability would be unparalleled. However, the acid release drew his attention the most. That ability would go perfectly with his fighting style. He looked at Arach. And how does one learn your style of Senjutsu? Arach frowned a bit. Other clans require you to absorb the errant nature chakra in the air. We use a special type of toxin to give you our abilities. However, this toxin is extremely deadly and requires thorough training in resisting poisons. He smirked a bit at that. I have trained myself for 6 years in resisting poisons. I will be able to handle it. Arach smirked a bit. What a convenient summoner. Elise required years of poison resistance training before she was able to undergo the Vilima toxin. She took out an ancient-looking vial from a spider and approached Menma. She cut herself with a knife and black blood flowed into a wooden goblet, filling it halfway. She then poured the crystal-clear concoction from the vial into the cup, filling it to nearly the brim. She handed the cup to Menma and spoke seriously. This will hurt you more than anything that has happened in your life. It will feel as if every cell in your body is melting and every nerve cell will hurt horribly. We will wrap you in one of our healing cocoons until the process is complete. The Villamot toxin will take 3 days to fully integrate with your body. After that, if you live, it will take around a week for you to heal. Menma nodded and mentally prepared himself as he drank deeply from the goblet. As soon as he finished the drink, spiders immediately started wrapping him in a cocoon. He barely acknowledged the spider silk around him as he felt an enormous amount of pain spreading through his body. The pain was worse than the time he overdosed on black widow venom to immunize himself. As he started to pass out, he thought of his friends, Lee's encouraging thumbs up and a sunny smile. Ikumo's soft smile, hands clasped behind her back as she encouraged him on. Anko's smirk as she told him to survive or she would find a way to make his afterlife hell. He smiled a bit in the cocoon. The pain seemed to dull a bit as he continued to think of his friends' encouragements. His precious people were waiting for him to return. Yeah. He would not die here. Chapter 7. Changes and the Rookie 12. Forbidden Forest Spider Realm. 10 days after Villamot venom was injected, Menma Pav. Menma slowly opened his eyes and looked around. He was laying on a hammock made out of spider silk in one of the cocoon-looking houses the spiders lived in. He got up from the hammock and rubbed his eyes a bit. His entire body felt sore from the senjutsu process. Though he could already tell some of the benefits of senjutsu. He could sense some spiders skittering around the forest. He could also tell that he had about 20% more chakra than normal. He sighed a bit before looking around the room and saw a mirror and stepped in front of it. His eyes widened a bit. His once light blonde, almost white hair had turned midnight black. His bangs were longer, now hanging a bit past his chin, Medusa's hairstyle after absorbing Arachne. Under his right eye there was a half spider web pattern. He sighed a bit looking at his face. Anko would flip out. Not only had he been gone for 3 days longer than he had told her, but his change in appearance would also spark her rage. He sighed again before looking down and noticing his lack of cloths, and he blushed. He looked around and saw some clothes laid out for him. There was a black sleeveless hoodie with 2 silver spider web patterns on the hood, baggy shinobi-style black pants, and shinobi-style black sandals. His gas mask laid on top of the clothes. He sighed a bit and put on the outfit and found them very comfortable. They felt like silk, but seemed to be very durable. He left the cocoon home and found Arachne still sitting on her throne drinking some wine, or at least he hoped it was wine. She turned to him and smiled warmly. "Ah, so you survived, good, your human friends have been worrying. I would return soon so you can calm them." He winced a bit at the reminder that his friends were most likely worried. He nodded to Arachne. "Thank you for your help and the chance to become a summoner for this clan. I will make sure to honor the spider clan." Arachne chuckled a bit and waved her fan. "No need to be so formal, it has been a long time since we have had a summoner and I so hope you bring some interest to this boring lifestyle of mine. Come back soon for some training in the art of our senjutsu. Also, if you wish to summon me, just do the normal summoning jutsu, but also call out my name, I will come." "Ah." She snapped her fingers and Menma disappeared in a poof of smoke and she smirked a bit. What an interesting boy. Forest of Death front entrance Konoha. As soon as he appeared in a poof of smoke, he sweat dropped as he saw Anko at the front entrance, looking murderously at him. She marched up to him and hit him on the side of his head. "Hard, you little idiot. Do you know how worried I was when you did not come back the 7th day? No, of course you didn't, you were off gallivanting with the spider clan." He looked at her wide eyes. How did she know he had interacted with the spider clan? Anko glared at him and continued, "I know you signed the spider contract because every allied summoning clan knows when a new summoning bond is formed. You're lucky that the snakes have been allied with the spiders for generations and told me you were the one who accepted the contract or I would have alerted the village that you were missing." Menma sighed a bit at this. At least he would not have to explain to Anko the change of his appearance. He looked at the still furious face of Anko and spoke calmly. "I needed an edge against Shio's toads, so I took a calculated risk to get my own summoning contract." Anko whacked him upside the head again. "You should have at least told me what you were attempting. I could have helped prepare you for the more unfriendly summoning clans. If you had been transported to the shark or alligator clan, you would have had to prove yourself in combat against the son of their boss summon. They're famous for killing all potential summoners but the strongest." He winced a bit at that information. He really was lucky to get the spiders. Though he wondered what they would have done if Arachne had not approved of him, and he shivered a bit. Anko seemed a bit calmer than before. "We need to see the Hokage Gaki. He has called us and Team 10 for something." Hokage's office Konoha. Soon teams 9 and 10 were gathered in the Hokage's office waiting for him to speak. He looked at the teams, pausing on Menma to look at his new style and web markings before continuing his observations. Minato looked up from their files. "Team 9 and 10, I have read your files and have been impressed by your 2 teams' progress. However, as you know, the next Chunin exams will be hosted in Konoha in 8 months. For the first time since the first Shinobi War, all 5 nations will be competing. Both teams' eyes widened, every nation would be competing in this Chunin exams. Menma stepped forward a bit. Hokage-sama, why is Kumo participating in this tournament? I thought the tensions were high between our two villages. Minato nodded yes, we have not had the best relations with Kumo ever since the Hyuga incident. However, since 4 of the 5 nations were participating, they decided to send a team as well. It is for this reason that I am not sending both your teams on any more C ranks until the Chunin exams. Everyone wanted to protest a bit, but a look from the Hokage stopped them. I know it is a bit unfair, but you will be receiving pensions for your lost earnings. I do not want any of you to be injured or potentially assassinated by competing countries while you are out of the village. You may be allowed to do D ranks, but I want you all to train and do your best to prove your worth to the other nations in the next exams. Now everyone but Anko and Menma please leave, we still have one more thing to discuss. Everyone nodded and everyone but Anko and Menma left the room. Minato looked at Menma. I noticed you dyed your hair and got a tattoo, unfortunately you will have to retake your shinobi license photo. I wish you luck in the upcoming Chunin exams. Anko and Menma nodded and left to retake his shinobi license. Training Ground 9 Konoha 1 hour after the Hokage meeting. All of the members of Team 9 were at their usual training ground. Lee and Yakumo were pre-stirring Menma on the reason for his sudden change in look. He sighed a bit. I changed my look because I gained a summoning contract. Yakumo and Lee's eyes widened. Lee's eyes suddenly seemed to catch fire. Yosh. That is so youthful, Menma. With your comrades we will be able to increase our teamwork and our youth. Yakumo deadpanned a bit at Lee's usual behavior and turned to Menma. Congratulations Menma with your new summoning contract, with the web markings I'm guessing you are able to summon spiders. They would fit you. He nodded. Yes, I have been accepted as their summoner. These changes are due to a process they did to make me more compatible with their techniques. After discussing the spider clan a bit more, they began team training by including spiders of various sizes into their exercises. After 3 hours of this, Lee had to go train with Guy for his afternoon practice and Yakumo had clan training. Anko went to hang out with Kurenai. Soon Menma was standing alone in the training field, contemplating what to do. He thought for a bit longer before running through some hand seals and bidding his thumb Kuchius no Jutsu. Arachin. The Spider Queen appeared and looked around a bit before smiling at Menma. It has been a while since I left the spider realm. However, I did not expect to be summoned this early by you. What did you need? He looked at Arachin seriously. I have 8 months to prepare for the Chunin exams. I would like you to train me in some of the skills the Spider Clan has access to. Arachin frowned a bit, tapping her chin. In that amount of time you can learn the acid release and some of the less known techniques the Spider Clan utilizes with chakra strings. It takes years to learn the spider transformation and learning my sensory technique. He nodded, expecting that information. I would be willing to learn the acid release, and could you explain some of the other skills you could teach me with chakra strings? Arachin nodded. Our chakra string techniques are the foundation of our spider silk techniques. We spread our chakra in a web formation to guide where we send our silk. However, we discovered that we can use this chakra web to sense, ensnare, and kill our opponents. We adapted this technique for future summoners. Menma nodded, preparing for the training with Arachin. Konoha Academy graduating day. 6 months after training with Arachin. During the 6 months that Arachin tutored him was quite enjoyable. He learned that Arachin, despite comprising all the knowledge and sentience of most of the spiders in the world, had her own personality. She was a nice woman if a bit skewed morally wise. She viewed any spider as her son or daughter and had taken to calling him Eggling. She had taught him a great deal in these 6 months. He had gotten acid release to a basic level and could use them like water ninjas. He had also learned to form chakra strings from any tenketsu of his body to form a web around him. This web can be used to detect people similar to the Byakugan. He could also channel his acid release through the web and cause various effects on his enemies. He could not inject too many lethal poisons into his chakra yet, but he has managed to spread his acid release in a paralyzing mixture. He was spying on the graduating class again, leaning against the outer wall as he observed the graduates. Today was the day they would take their final exams to become genin. He spotted his former family, some village nobles, and shinobi clans, congratulating their children for graduating. Soon he spotted a head of blonde hair and focused on his former sister. She had changed from a little brat the last time he saw her to a young woman. She had a hairstyle similar to Minato's, but had a spiky ponytail similar to Jiraiya of the Sannin. She wore a dark blue turtleneck and forest green shinobi pants with dark green shinobi-style sandals. On the back of her shirt the Uzumaki swirl was imprinted. He felt the hatred he held for his sister and his former family rise to the surface, but he kept it in check from showing on his face. He knew he would get his revenge in 2 months when they fought in the Chunin exams. He turned away and walked away, pulling up his hood as he did so. Shio's Pav. Shio was having one of the best days of her life. She had woke up to see the smiling faces of her family and had rushed to get ready for the exams. When she had arrived at the classroom she met her friends and they talked for a bit before Iruka entered the room and handed out their tests. After the exams she was extremely proud of herself. She was finally a genin of Konoha. She would soon surpass her Tusan and become Hokage. Databeo. She was basking in the happiness radiating from her parents. What she hadn't told her parents is she had the ability to sense emotions. This ability had emerged a year ago and she could not understand how she got it. However, she had abused this ability to tell what other people thought of her. It came as a surprise to her when she felt a deep hatred being directed at her and her parents. She looked around and saw a boy leaning near the wall of the academy. He wore a leaf headband around his arm, so he was a shinobi. He was probably one of the oddest people she had seen. He had black hair with front bangs that stretched down past his chin and spiked hair in the back. He had pupilless blue eyes with a spider web tattoo under his right eye. What caught her attention, however, was that he was radiating so much hatred. However, under the deep hatred she felt she could sense emotions such as sadness, envy, and loneliness. She turned to her Tusan and pointed at the boy who was walking away. Tusan, who is that boy? Minato turned to the back of the boy she pointed to and said, that is Menma, he was the rookie of the year last year. He surprised many by beating several clan members for the top spot. Why? She looked at the retreating boy again thoughtfully, no reason, Tusan. Hidden training ground. Later that night Menma Pav. Menma was training in his chakra webs when he detected someone heading his way at Chunin speeds. He turned to look at the man approaching and saw the academy teacher Mizuki. He was holding a large scroll on his back that he recognized immediately, the forbidden scroll where he stole many of his techniques as a child. He went through some hand seals and used one of his latest techniques, acid release. Sticky binding web no jutsu. This jutsu was one of the most simple acid release techniques. It allowed for an untoxic sap-like substance to travel along the web and quickly hardening while maintaining its stickiness. Soon the chakra strings around him became visible and Mizuki stuck to some of his web. He called out to his former sensei, Mizuki-san, I would ask that you surrender and return the forbidden scroll before I kill you. He took out his crossbow from the holster on his back to increase his threat. Mizuki looked enraged that he was being talked down to by a genin. As if I am going to surrender to you, I am an elite chunin, well you're just a genin. He took off one of his two giant shurikens to cut the sticky rope binding him and threw it at Menma. Menma felt a truly twisted smile stretch across his face. This is the first true battle he had since Rogan and he was itching to test out some of his new abilities. He easily dodged the shuriken and went through some hand signs. His chest expanded a bit and he spoke acid release. Acid shot. Small balls of acid shot from his mouth in a gun-like fashion at Mizuki. He dodged and the balls of acid started to eat through the trees they hit. Mizuki looked at the damage wide-eyed. What the hell are you? You should only be a weak genin. He looked at the raging man and spoke, it's not that I'm too strong, it's just that you are too weak. With those words he took out his crossbow and channeled his chakra through it and started firing at the rapidly dodging Mizuki. Soon arrows could be seen sticking throughout the tree line in an intricate formation. What Mizuki could not see are the chakra strings connecting the arrows. His twisted smirk widened a bit and went through some hand signs again. Acid release. Paralytic scattering dew. Soon the web of chakra lines above them started to grow damp with acid and the lines started to rapidly vibrate, dripping almost like rainfall on their location, each blob of water, a potent paralyzing solution designed to mimic morning dew. Soon Mizuki was drenched from the paralyzing rain. He started to walk up to Mizuki, a chakra scalpel forming in his hands. However, he was distracted when his former sister Shio burst into the clearing. Mizuki. Return the forbidden scroll. She paused as she observed the situation. Mizuki was seemingly passed out on the ground and Menma was standing above him with glowing hands. She felt the sickening emotions of Mizuki and the cold feeling she felt from Menma earlier. What the hell happened here? Databeo. Menma smirked a bit at his former sister. I defeated the traitor Mizuki, your Anbu guard should be here to take him away soon. As soon as he said that, two masked Anbu members dropped to the ground and took Mizuki somewhere. The two genins stood in silence for a bit before Menma turned and picked up the forbidden scroll and looked at Shio. Come on, we should report this to the Hokage. Shio felt the bitter emotions when he spoke of the Hokage but didn't mention them. She was curious to why he seemed to hate her family so much. From what she could tell from his emotions, he seemed to be using the hatred he felt for them to hide his sadness. They walked together a bit in silence before jumping on the rooftops the rest of the way to the Hokage's office. Hokage's office. Menma's Pav. When they arrived at the office, Menma put the forbidden scroll on the Hokage's desk and stepped back a bit. Minato opened the scroll to check the contents and nodded a bit. Thank you Menma and Shio for retrieving this. I was in a meeting the council discussing team placements when he snuck into the office for the scroll. Shio scratched the back of her head a bit. Tusen, I didn't really do anything, it was Menma who apprehended Mizuki. She felt the surprise radiating from Menma. Did he think that she would take credit for something that she didn't do? Minato also seemed a bit surprised and turned to Menma. Then thank you Menma for apprehending Mizuki. The penalty for stealing the forbidden scroll is death and a B rank missing nin status if he had managed to escape the village. You will earn the bounty on his head when he is put to death. Menma nodded. Thank you Hokage-sama. Minato put the forbidden scroll in a hidden drawer in his desk and spoke. Thank you again you two for returning this. I will see you later Shio and good night Menma-san. They both nodded at the dismissal and left the room. Konoha Streets 8 p.m. Shio's POV. They walked out of the Hokage building and stood apart from each other awkwardly. She cleared her throat. Well, I hope to see you again and find out why you seem to have so much buried pain against my family. Menma nodded and started to walk away. She frowned a bit at his back before turning around for home. Uzumaki residence Kushina's POV. Kushina was flipping through a picture album of her daughter. She was so proud that her little girl was a shinobi. However, as she flipped through the pages and eventually arrived at a 4-year-old Shio, she felt something snap inside her head. She gasped and dropped the book, running out of the house. The book lay where it fell, open, showing the picture of Naruto's smiling face for the world to see. Menma's mindscape. The fox with two tails sat on top of the pond in Naruto's mindscape as he watched the Hergla shatter and sighed. It was almost time to reveal himself to his uncounting host. He hoped that he would understand his reasons for separating him from his family. He settled down on all fours and stewed in his guilt for causing another family to suffer because of the Uchiha. Chapter 8. Battle of Hatred and Regret. Hokage's office Konoha Kushina's POV 1 month before Chunin exams. Kushina was running through the streets of Konoha, her mind a mess. The skies seemed to reflect her mood as the clouds were dark gray with thunder in the distance. How could she have forgotten her own son? However, she was not hysterical enough not to notice the feel of a Jinjutsu lifting. If the Jinjutsu had any relation to why she had forgotten her Sachi, then he or she would burn. She ran into the Hokage building and kicked open Minato's door. Minato looked up startled at his wife's sudden entry. Kushina. What is going? His words died off as he saw her teary face. Kushina looked at Minato teary-eyed. Our son Minato. We forgot about our son. Earlier I was looking through a photo album and I saw a picture of him. Minato felt something shatter in his mind and immediately memories of Naruto flooded into his head. He sorted through a few of them and felt sickened as he put a hand over his forehead. Why could I not remember my son? That felt like a Jinjutsu had been broken from my mind. Kushina brushed aside her tears. We need to find him Minato, who knows where he could have gone. He could be living on the streets. Minato rubbed his forehead thinking over the situation logically. He was devastated by this revelation. As an orphan himself he knew the pain of growing up without parents. But to have parents and seemingly have been abandoned by them, even unintentionally. He would feel hatred for his former parents and wish to get revenge. He looked at Kushina. We can't just announce to the whole village that our son is missing. With the Chunin exams coming up, a scandal this huge of a Hokage abandoning their child could ruin the village in front of all the clients. Kushina looked angry. Then we do what? Do nothing while my Sachi is out there somewhere. Minato shook his head. I never said that. I will gather every Anbu member and Jonin in the village and tell them to search for Naruto discreetly. I will also send notes to the hospital to test the blood of all non-clan genin to see if any of them match our DNA. Kushina nodded, whipping tears from her eyes as she looked fiercely at Minato. I do not care if our son hates us for our neglect, even if it was under the force of a Jinjutsu. It is probably too late to be his mother, but I will be damned if I do not make sure that he is safe and offer our home to him again. Minato nodded with a pained expression on his face. She left the Hokage's tower with a determined expression on her face. She would search the records of the orphanages first, before looking at the academy records to see if she could find anything on Naruto. Minato's office Konoha Minato's POV. As soon as Kushina left he buried his face into his hands. How could this have happened? He thought back to all the times in his life he could have been affected by Jinjutsu to ignore his son. The only time he could think of someone having enough skill to cast a Jinjutsu on him is the masked man from that night. He pulled out the files of all the genin from last year. He discarded the sheets of the clan heirs and children with alibis. Soon he was down to one candidate that could be Naruto. The folder showed the black-haired and blue-eyed genin Menma. He discarded the difference in hair color and lack of pupil. Both could be results from dyeing one's hair and overtraining. His pupilless blue eyes also matched in color to his own. He opened the folder to the boy's history and discovered that he applied for orphan status at age 6 and said that he did not know his heritage. The boy applied for the academy at age 8 the next day and was rarely seen around the village until he entered the academy. He stood up, he needed to find Menma. Uzumaki Estate Konoha Shio's POV immediately after the wave mission. Shio and the rest of Team 7 had just returned from their C-turned A rank in the Land of Waves. It was a long mission and she was anxious to get home. Kakashi-sensei had told them they would report their mission tomorrow and they had the rest of the day off. She entered the estate and entered the house calling I'm home. She looked around, that's strange, Kushina is usually at home by now, did Kasen go out? She entered the living room and saw a photo album laying open on the floor. She picked the book up and saw the picture of Naruto and felt a breaking sensation in her head and memories of her older brother came rushing to her head. She gasped and dropped the book in shock. Where was her Ani-san? She clasped her hands together as if in prayer and expanded her senses. She had been practicing senjutsu with the toads for over a month now and was able to grasp the basics of it. She created a shadow clone and had it meditate with her. Soon a red pigment surrounded her eyes and they snapped open revealing toad-like pupils. She stood up and left the clone meditating and went to where a faint presence of her brother's chakra could be felt. She entered one of their spare bedrooms they never really entered and saw a sparse room. There was a single bed, a desk stacked with books and notes, and a bookshelf. She went where she sensed the chakra and found a sealing tag on the desk. It was a beginner's seal that stored chakra like a battery for people who are learning Fuinjutsu. She memorized her brother's chakra signature and sat down in a lotus position again and expanded her senses. She had never been able to sense that far before, but she ignored that problem and kept expanding her sensing range until she was covering the entire village and the training grounds beyond. She opened her eyes and dashed out the window as she felt her brother's chakra signature at Training Ground 26. Training Ground 26 Konoha Menma's POV. Training Ground 26 is a unique training ground in Konoha. Instead of a forested terrain, the training ground is one large lake that has several large cliffs surrounding it. There were plenty of small islands on the lake and several waterfalls cascading down the cliff surfaces. This is the perfect training ground for training for underwater fighting, water ninjutsu, or water walking. Currently Menma was practicing the final step of water mastery training, reversing the flow of a waterfall. He wanted to complete this exercise before the Chunin exams. He was about to continue his training when he felt a presence behind him. He was surprised when he saw Shio standing there looking at him with an unreadable expression. He tried to control the hate he felt for the girl, but as always it came bubbling up to the surface whenever she was near. He glared lightly, what do you want? I do not want you to interrupt my training. Shio frowned a bit and spoke Naruto Ani-san. He froze when he heard his former sister speak that name. His eyes narrowed in hate as he stared at her. I do not know what you are talking about. I am not your brother. Shio did not flinch, but her hands balled into fists. I know your chakra signature. I do not know why I forgot you for so long, but I remember now. I know without a doubt that you are Naruto, my brother. Please come back home and we can be a family again. Menma scowled a bit. Even if I was your brother, I am not now. Your pathetic parents never had time for the lesser sibling, so why should I even think of returning to that home? He felt his anger grow a bit more as the web marking under his eye seemed to expand a bit down his cheek. Shio seemed to be getting angry and shouted, I do not know why they would forget about you, but I know my parents. They would never leave any child of theirs behind. The Uzumaki family never abandoned their own. Naruto glowered at Shio and shouted back, you may believe in your parents, but I gave them many opportunities to notice me. I shouted at them, begged them, prayed for them to notice me, but they always shoved me away to focus on you. He felt his hatred grow as he felt the toxicity of his blood increase in response to his anger. Shio seemed to steel herself if you refused to come home. She unsealed her Nadachi. The sword was as tall as she was and had a plain black grip with an ornate steel guard. She got into her stand with the blade pointed behind her in a crouched stance and sprinted forward while shouting, then I will force you. Shio used her wind manipulation around her blade and twisted around in a graceful arc before swinging her sword, sending a strong slash of wind at Menma while shouting majestic slash of the heavenly breeze. He scowled a bit before activating his chakra scalpel and cut through the wind slash, cutting the strike in two pieces that slammed into the cliff behind him, deeply scaring it. He knew close combat against Shio would be suicide. Her wind manipulation and sword skills were almost unrivaled in the village. His arrows would be useless against her wind, but he had one advantage over her. They were on water. He sped through some hand seals before shouting acid style. Water spider bombs. Out of the water bubbled medium-sized spiders made out of water with a red dot in the center. They all dashed at Shio with medium speeds. Shio quickly spun around in a pirouette, causing a cyclone of wind and water to come up around her as the water spiders jumped at her, exploding violently as they came in contact with a wall of wind and water. Soon the water wall was cut in half as another blade of wind cut through it at him. He ran through 4 hand seals before calling out water style, hardened water wall. The lake surged underneath them as a hardened wall of water blocked the wind blade. He channeled chakra through his hands again and went through 3 more hand seals acid style. Giant spider bomb no jutsu. From the large wall of water a huge spider with a glowing red core emerged and pounced on Shio and exploded on her. He stood there still on guard, he doubted that spider would have killed her. Soon out of the spray of water from the bomb, he could hear a slightly whirling of wind and widened his eyes at the sight before him. Around Shio there were 4 large fan-like blades spinning around her forming a shield. He inspected the blades a bit. So this is the famed chakra manipulation of the Namikaze Uzumaki family. Many people speculated what Minato could do with Kushina's ability to harden her chakra outside of her body. I guess this is the result. Shio nodded. Yes, this is my true sword style, dance of the 5 blades. Please surrender Naruto, you will not be able to defeat me. He narrowed his eyes. He knew he had no chance against her in melee combat, normally. He formed his chakra scalpels around his hands, but this time used pure acid release chakra instead of medical chakra, and acid began to drip off his hands as they turned black. He spread out a chakra web around his body to increase his sensory and also began to use senjutsu. His eyes gained the same spider web insignia that Arachin had, and the whites of his eyes turned black. He glared at Shio with his new eyes and spoke. I will not surrender to you, I dedicated my life to defeat you, and I will prove myself to be stronger than you. With those words he went through several hand seals with his poison palms and shouted acid release. Dakukiri no Jutsu. Soon most of the entire battlefield was filled with a purple mist. Shio stood inside the mist, her blades of chakra circling around her forming a ball of pure air to prevent the poison from affecting her. Soon out of the mist Menma appeared, with his chakra scalpels about to cut her. Before he could reach her however his shoulder was stabbed by one of the floating blades of chakra. Menma widened his eye before smirking as he dissolved into acid. Shio scowled, those clones were incredibly dangerous, if she killed one of them close to her body, they would cover her in acid. She went through some hand seals before inhaling some air wind style. Great breakthrough. And a huge gust of air was unleashed from her mouth and the poison mist was blown away. Once the mist dissipated she was surrounded by 10 Narutos. She glanced around trying to tell which one was real. She scowled a bit, one wrong move would have her covered in acid. She spun around and unleashed a circular slash around her that bisected all of the clones and raised a wall of wind around her to prevent the resulting explosions of acid from reaching her. She stood tense for a few seconds before she felt glowing hands clamp around her ankles. She screamed as she felt her tendons were cut and Menma rose out of the water behind her, chakra scalpels glowing around his hands. He sneered at her end of the line. He raised his hands in a cross fashion, presumably to decapitate her when she went through some hand seals and bit her thumb summoning no jutsu. He jumped away just in time for a huge red toad to appear in a puff of smoke. Shio panted a bit from the summoning cost of Gamabunta and felt the Kyuubi's chakra healing her cut tendons and stood up. Gamabunta looked annoyed as he stared up at Shio. Why did you call me up here, Gaki? Shio looked at the huge frog underneath her and said, I am fighting my lost brother, we need to knock him out and return him home so dad and mom can explain what is happening. Gamabunta looked increasingly annoyed, and don't you think summoning me is a bit overkill, he would have continued, but he heard a shout of summoning no jutsu interrupted him and in a large burst of smoke a spider almost as large as Gamabunta appeared. Menma was standing on the head of the beast and spoke calmly. Aragog, let us fight together against this toad. He felt the spider under him shift a bit and it spoke in a deep voice, yes summoner, this toad will feed our clan for a long time. Shio gaped at the sight of the spider. How did he brother get his hands on the spider summoning contract? Gamabunta under her shifted a bit as he gripped his giant tanto. I had heard rumors of a new spider summoner, but I didn't believe them, however I've always enjoyed fried spider legs. Soon the two titans were battling, reshaping the training ground as their attacks broke the cliff sides around them. Their summoners offering assistance with elemental attacks and alerting their summon to dangers. Aragog seemed to rely on trapping Gamabunta in webs, while the toad kept slicing through the webs and dodging the pincer attacks. After a few minutes of intense combat between the two animals, they were both on their last legs. Gamabunta looked up at Shio and spoke, ha ha ha, I am only good for round one more attack Gaki, let's make it count. Shio looked down at Gamabunta and nodded. Gamabunta's mouth swelled with oil and he spat it out in torrents at Aragog while Shio used the fireball jutsu to light the oil on fire, making a huge gout of flames at the spider. Aragog quickly formed a large web in front of him while Menma went through hand signs and combined the web with his water chakra to create a huge wall of water that blocked the large sea of flames. As the steam cleared from the amount of flames hitting the cold water, both Menma and Shio were panting as they gazed at each other from opposite sides of two cliff faces. Shio lifted her head and back inside her room at the estate, her shadow clone poofed into smoke. Nature chakra surged into Shio and she went into sage mode. As she entered sage mode she remembered a warning from Pa about sage mode. Flashback. Shio and Pa Toad were sitting across from one another, Shio in sage mode as Pa observed. After a few minutes of sage mode she began to feel herself lose control of the energy before she felt a harsh smack of a stick on her head. All looked proud of Shio. Well Shio-chan, it looks like you are able to stay in sage mode for around 5 minutes before you begin to lose control of the energy. If you are forced to use Senjutsu before you finish your training, make sure to only stay in the mode for 5 minutes only. Then flashback. Menma scowled as he felt the nature chakra enter Shio. He barely had any chakra left after blocking Gamabunta's flame-toad bullet. He was thinking of his next action when he remembered something that Arachin told him. Flashback. Arachin was standing in front of Menma as he practiced acid release. Naruto, come here. Naruto looked over curiously and walked closer to Arachin. She smiled at him with her usual sleepy expression and spoke. I wanted to speak to you about learning partial spider transformation. This form usually takes around a year and a half to master. However, there is another way to use it. Naruto looked interested. How can I use the transformation without training for it, sensei? Arachin spoke seriously. If you summoned me in battle, we could merge and I could force the transformation for a short period of time, around 5 minutes max in battle. Naruto looked thoughtful. I will remember that, sensei, thank you. Then flashback. Menma went through some hand seal summoning jutsu. Arachin. Soon in a puff of smoke Arachin appeared. She smiled at him and nodded, already knowing what they wanted. She reached down and kissed him on the lips, merged with him. Soon power exploded off of Naruto as the spiderweb pattern in his eyes seemed to glow and expand across his eyes, and 4 pincer-like claws exploded from his back and he felt fangs growing from his mouth. He also felt his muscles grow denser as he finished merging. The form is a male version of Elise from LOL. Naruto and Shio stared at each other for a bit before dashing at each other and slammed their fists against one another, and a shockwave blew the water away around them as they engaged in fierce taijutsu battle. Shio had the advantage of her frog kata and increased physical ability, while Naruto had 4 extra appendages to fight with and his own increased strength. They jumped around the battlefield, both sides never yielding as they continued to fight fiercely against one another. As they fought, they started to feel the other's reason for fighting. Naruto felt Shio's regret and determination to remove him of his hatred. Shio felt Naruto's anger and sadness from being abandoned, but also his determination to prove himself stronger than her. Soon after 5 minutes they both were facing each other, panting heavily, the extra features of Senjutsu gone as they stared at each other. Shio panted as she spoke. I only have enough chakra for one more jutsu, and I'm sure it is the same for you, let's end this. She lifted her hand. A green Rasengan formed in it, spiraling fiercely as it started to rain and thunder around them. She jumped forward and yelled Rasengan. Naruto stretched both arms out, one gripping the other as a ball of incredibly toxic venom formed a sphere in his hands that had 6 legs and a dark red core, Arachin soul. He jumped to meet Shio shouting Queen Venom Bomb. The attacks collided in a large blast of energy, the toxic bomb meeting the maelstrom of the Rasengan. The 2 attacks fought against each other for dominance. Soon however both techniques exploded, causing a massive implosion of the wind-saturated chakra, meeting the highly toxic acid. When the explosion died down, both Naruto and Shio were knocked unconscious on some fallen rubble side by side. The rain continued to fall on their forms as they ended the titanic battle. Soon Minato jumped down near them, staring sadly at their 2 forms. He felt great sadness that they had to fight in such a titanic battle. They should be living happily together, not trying to kill each other. He felt tears roll down his cheeks as he felt like a failure. What was the point of being the strongest ninja alive today if he couldn't even protect his family? He looked up at the rain in pain before he made a shadow clone to carry Naruto and Shio to the hospital. Inside Naruto's mindscape. Naruto opened his eyes to find himself laying on a large pond surrounded by forest. Around the pond were large torii. He looked around and spotted a small fox with 2 tails sitting in front of him. The fox seemed to be looking at him with understanding and pity as it spoke. Let us talk, Naruto Uzumaki. And there is my evil Cliffinger. Man, this battle was fun to write. I based Shio off of Yasuo and canon Naruto. If anyone has any questions or suggestions, please let me know. Chapter 9. The Game of Life. Naruto's Mindscape Area Unknown. Naruto's POV. Naruto looked around the landscape before focusing back on the 2-tailed kitsune. Who are you, and where is this? The kitsune looked a bit amused before it spoke. I am the former 9-tailed fox, the great Kyuubi no Kitsune, and we are in your mindscape. He felt his eyes widen. Why are you here when you should be sealed within my sister? The Kyuubi chuckled. Yes, I should be sealed within your sister if I had not inserted a tiny portion of my chakra into you before I was sealed. As you grew, so did the Yokai chakra inside of you, allowing it to hold my consciousness. Naruto glared suspiciously at the Kyuubi. Why would you escape from Shio's seal just to seal yourself into me? Without a seal holding you back, you could escape from my body easily. The fox nodded. Yes, I could escape from your body at any time, however I have no wish to do so. I gave up most of my chakra to move to your body, so I am much weaker than before. Your body gave me anonymity from my enemies, as well as a safe haven to restore my former strength. Naruto nodded, understanding the logic. And what happens when you recover your strength, will you attack Konoha again? The Kyuubi shook his head. No, I have no interest in Konoha or its people. I was forced to attack Konoha by Madara Uchiha. He narrowed his eyes. Madara Uchiha had died years ago in the battle against the first Hokage. The Kyuubi's eyes glowed angrily. That is a lie. Madara Uchiha is alive and forced me to attack Konoha. He also used his eternal Manjikyu Sharingan eyes to force your parents to abandon you. Naruto's eyes widened and remembered what Anko once told him. Flashback. Anko looked at Menma seriously. No parents just spontaneously forgets and neglects their children. Even if they focused more on their sister they would never have forgotten you. It is not in human nature. Then flashback. He had ignored her advice then, too caught up in his desire to revenge to give it much thought. But it did make sense. However, he remembered from reading about the Shinto religion that kitsunes were master manipulators. He looked at the Kyuubi. How do I know you're not just twisting the truth for your own benefit? I know the kitsunes are masters of illusions and manipulation. How do I know that you weren't the one who cast the genjutsu on my parents? He almost missed it, but the Kyuubi's eyes flickered a bit with guilt before returning to his regular calm expression. That's it, isn't it? You were the one who cast the genjutsu on my parents when you injected me with your yakai. Afterwards you would tell me it was Madara Uchiha to spark my rage towards him. The Kyuubi sighed deeply. You are smarter than I gave you credit for, ninja. Yes, I used an illusion to force your parents to ignore your existence. In a flash Naruto had a chakra scalpel out and tried to cut the Kyuubi, but 9 balls of an ethereal flame stopped him. The Kyuubi had not even flinched. Do not tempt me, ninja. Despite only having a fraction of my former power, I am more than enough to deal with you easily. Naruto scowled at the reason for his abandonment and hatred. Then why would you do it? Why would you force my parents to abandon me? For your own sick amusement. Answer me. The Kyuubi was silent for a few seconds before sighing heavily. If nothing else, the boy in front of him deserved the truth very well, ninja, but know this. To understand my reasons for manipulating your life, we must go to the very beginning. The world around them shifted until Naruto saw 2 giants, one male and one female, fighting each other. The male had an aged face with long white hair and wore a simple monk's robes with prayer beads adorning it. The woman was beautiful with dark black hair and wore a beautiful white kimono. Their fight was on the level of gods, reshaping the earth, destroying continents, and obliterating anything caught in the crossfire. The Kyuubi appeared next to him and explained, in the very first stages of our world, Izanagi fought his wife, Izanami. The argument was whether or not to share their powers with the humans of the world. Izanagi wished to share his power with the humans and spread peace, while Izanami wished to rule over all humans with an iron fist and keep them weak and helpless. The battle shaped the world to how it is today. At the very end of the battle, Izanagi reigned victorious over his former wife. The scene depicted the man stab a sword through the woman's heart. As she fell to the ground she glared up at her husband and issued a prophecy. One day, my husband, I will return to this world in one form or the other. You have only delayed my plans. Izanagi looked at his wife sadly before speaking. You shall never walk amongst the land of the living, my beloved. I banish you to Yami for the rest of eternity. You shall be the seal that protects this world from the realms beyond. Izanagi lifted a monk's staff and a black void engulfed Izanami. Kyuubi continued his explanation. However, unknown to Izanagi at the time is that Izanami had one last trump card. The seed of the Shinju tree. The Shinju is a sentient tree that grows in the deepest regions of Yami. Anyone who eats the fruit of a Shinju will be terribly cursed but gain tremendous power. Izanami injected a small piece of her power into the seed and buried it before she was sealed away. The scene shifted again to show numerous wars and bloodshed until a great tree emerged from the blood of the fallen warriors and grew to a huge height, a fruit that looked like a peach at the very top. The Kyuubi looked upon the scene sadly before continuing. Eventually the Shinju tree grew from the blood of fallen warriors, producing its tainted fruit. It stayed there for many years before a princess, tired of the war and bloodshed, ate the fruit and gained its power to end the wars in the world. The scene showed a black-haired girl climbing to the top of the Shinju before gorging herself on the fruit. After it was eaten she fell to the ground in pain. Her hair and eyes turned white. She grew a third eye and horns, and the rabbit goddess Kagaya was born. With the power of the Shinju she ruled the world fairly for a time. However, eventually the energies of Izanami began to twist Kagaya. Soon Kagaya became a tyrant and demon, enforcing her rule on the world with a heavy fist. With Izanami whispering in her ear, she began to use the Shinju to drain the life force of her subjects, increasing her own power. Izanagi, finally stepping in to stop Kagaya, bestowed upon her sons 2 gifts. To the older brother he gave the Rinnegan. To the younger brother he gave the Byakugan and the power to manipulate his body. When Kagaya learned of this she merged with the Shinju to create a terrible beast known as the Juubi. The scene showed a monstrous beast with 10 tails battling 2 men. The battle continued for many days until the older brother Hagoromo sealed the Juubi's chakra inside himself, while his brother sealed the Juubi's body and in the moon and casted it out to space. After the battle both brothers were considered mortal gods. Hagoromo became known as the Sage of the Six Paths, while his brother was hidden in obscurity. Eventually both brothers found wives and started families. These children eventually started the Uchiha, Senju, Hyuga, and Kagaya clans. Nearly 100 years later on his deathbed, Hagoromo gathered 9 animal spirits he had befriended and gifted each of them a piece of the Juubi's chakra, creating the 9 Biju. I received the largest portion of the chakra. With his last breaths he told us to never let the Shinju be revived, or it would drain all life on the planet, allowing Kagaya to escape from her prison. However, he also made his younger son, Asura, his heir. This caused a feud between the Senju and Uchiha to fester for centuries. Eventually, after years of fighting, the heir of the Uchiha and Senju clans, Madara and Hiroshima, made a truce to create a ninja village. Years later Madara found a tablet left behind by Hagoromo that spoke of the Juubi and its power. Corrupted by this knowledge he began to plan to become the Jinchuriki of the Juubi like his ancestor. This led him to fake his death in his battle between Hiroshima and himself. In the shadows he began to make plans to gather the 9 Biju. I had been sealed in Mito Uzumaki during the battle and that gave him the idea of Jinchuriki. Gathering the 9 Biju by himself would be suicide, but kidnapping their sealed containers would be child's play. He manipulated the budding villages at the time to seal the Biju inside of humans and use them as weapons of war. While the nations battled each other he started to form his own organization, the Akatsuki. Now he hopes to revive the Juubi to become its Jinchuriki, becoming a mortal god like Hagoromo so long ago. What he does not know, however, is that the Juubi contains Kagaya and a bit of Izanami's essence, which would recreate the Shinju and absorb him and all life in the elemental nations, weakening the seal on Izanami enough so she can escape, dooming all life on the planet. Naruto was wide-eyed at this information, he had just learned the origin of the ninja world. He glared at the Kyuubi again. Who are you? A normal animal spirit would not know of all of this. The Kyuubi chuckled and a spirit outline of a white fox with 9 tails surrounded the Kyuubi. You are correct, young mortal, I was not just a fox spirit but the god of foxes, Inari Akami. I befriended Hagoromo and he sealed the largest piece of the Juubi into me for safekeeping. Naruto felt a bit confused. Are you saying the god was able to be subjugated by Madara to do as he wished? Inari winced, an unforeseen complication. The Juubi chakra contained within me allowed him to control me. I assume Hagoromo knew this, but thought that the Sharingan could be used to stop us if we went on a rampage. Instead it was used to enslave the Biju. It was for this reason I gave up my chakra to enter you. I am now free from the Juubi's chakra and restored to my previous position as the fox god, Inari Akami. The god bowed its head in shame. However, I was very weak. Any opponent that killed you would have taken me with you. So I had to give you the one gift that would have protected you, anonymity. As the son of Minato Namikaze, you would have been exposed to assassination attempts and much more enemies than a nameless orphan. This gave me enough time to gather enough strength to protect myself. Naruto understood the reasons why Inari would do what he did. That does not mean that he had to like it. So you're telling me that you made my life hell just so I could be some pawn in the god's game of life? Inari seemed to look at him in pity. Yes, from the moment you were born, you were chosen to be one of the 3 prophecy children to save this world from the resurrection of Izanami. The mindscape seemed to shift and revert back to the pond and a door appeared behind Naruto. Inari stood in the middle of the lake and spoke. You may hate me, Naruto, but I did what is necessary. If Izanami no Akami is revived, the world is doomed. Naruto looked back at the fox before turning around and walked through the door. Konoha Hospital. Minato's POV. Minato sighed as he gazed at the unconscious figure of his estranged son. He had run a blood test on Menma and found out that he is Naruto Uzumaki. However, what worried him is the other DNA found in his blood. The doctors reported it seems as if someone or something took a chunk out of Naruto's DNA and replaced it. The medic Nin who did the blood test theorized that the extra DNA is the reason for his changed appearance. Shio had woken up several hours after the battle and received a severe tongue lashing and grounding for being so reckless. When she had described the battle they were amazed at their former son's skills. Minato assumed that Naruto was the new spider summoner that the Toads had been hearing rumors about. When he had heard that Shio had used rudimentary Senjutsu against Naruto he almost flipped. Senjutsu is an incredibly dangerous skill. If one is not old enough to contain the energies they could turn to stone. However, he was surprised when he heard that Naruto merged with some summoned woman and entered a form of Sage mode himself. He assumed it was similar to when Mappa would merge with Uraya and gather Sage chakra as he fought. Still, Shio was feeling the stress of her Sage mode by being sore in every single one of her muscles. The price of going into Sage mode too early is that the body cannot handle the strain, causing ripped muscles and other injuries. She was lucky she did not go over the limit or she could have been crippled. He perked up as he saw Naruto stirring and opening his eyes. Naruto's POV. Naruto opened his eyes to see the white room of the hospital. He looked around and saw his former father sitting there. He was surprised to feel none of the hatred he formerly felt for the man. He guessed all of his hatred was not directed at Madara, Inari, and the rest of the gods. Deep down he knew Minato was not at fault, who could resist the genjutsu of a god? Especially the god of foxes who specialize in illusions. He struggled to sit up, he was still feeling the after effects of using Sage mode without training. By fusing with Irachen she forces the process of transformation, which is very taxing on the body. He looked at Minato again and waited for the man to speak. Minato seemed to gather his thoughts together before he spoke. I grew up an orphan. My parents died during the Second Shinobi War and I was put in an orphanage. It was not a bad childhood, but living without parents is a very lonely existence. When I married Kushina I swore I would give my children the best childhood that I missed out on. Then you were born and we were so happy. I had just become Hokage and thought life could not get better. He seemed to grow weary and sighed heavily before he continued. Then the Kyuubi attack happened as your sister was born. Everything was such a mess, Kushina fighting for her life in the hospital, my daughter now a Jinchuriki for the strongest of the Bijuu and the third Hokage dead. He seemed to contemplate how to continue before he spoke again. Recently, Kushina and I felt as if a genjutsu was lifted. We cannot be sure who placed the illusion other that it must have been incredibly powerful for us to notice. Unknown to Minato, but his words confirmed what Inari had said in his mindscape. Naruto looked out the window as he considered Minato's words. Ever since I was 5 and I was locked out of the estate I swore revenge against your family. Minato winced at his former son's words, but let him continue. I trained every day to prove that I was better than my sister. I knew she was going to get training from at least 4 cage level ninja. So I practiced what she would not expect, medical ninjutsu, poisons, and other subjects. But now I've recently learned that my parents were under a genjutsu the entire time and that it was not entirely their fault. He paused unsure how to continue before speaking again. I do not have any more hatred towards your family, Minato-san. Minato looked resigned as he figured that Naruto was not done. He was correct. He continued, but I do not think that I can ever be a true part of your family. All those years of hating your existence cannot be erased so easily. Minato sighed resignedly. I thought as much. However, know that you have the full support of our family if you need it. You can also come back to the estate anytime you wish if you want to interact with the family again. However, I would expect a visit from Kushina soon. She was nearly broken about learning that we had abandoned you, even unintentionally. He nodded, he had expected that. Minato stood up and was about to leave the room before turning back. I am proud of the man you are today, Naruto. He left the room. As the door closed, Naruto closed his eyes a bit and thought of the situation. He felt so confused. Should he hate Izanami for causing all of this? Madara for continuing her work? Or Inari for serving the greater good and separating him from his family? He looked around the room and saw a small spider on the window and smiled a bit. Irachen. In a poof of smoke, Irachen was in the room sitting on the chair that Minato vacated, a concerned look on her face. He explained the situation and what he had learned from Inari as she sat there and listened quietly. When he had finished, she reached out and hugged him as she stroked his hair. It is alright to be confused, Naruto. However, all you can do is look to the future and decide your own destiny. Even if the gods had planned your life does not mean you have to follow your path to their wishes. You can be whatever you wish to. What the gods never understood is that humanity's greatest gift is to not be bound by the strings of fate. You can adapt, grow, and gain experience to meet this threat head-on. I have faith in the summoner of the Spider Clan that you can break the web binding you to the gods' plan and find your own path. She kissed him on the forehead and sat with him looking out the window, thinking of the situation and how to proceed. Chapter 10. Clarity and Chunin exams. On top of Konoha Monument 3 days after being released from the hospital, Naruto's POV. Naruto stood on top of the third Hokage's head and looked out towards the village. It was raining lightly, so he had his hood up. His entire life had changed drastically over the past few days. The fight with his sister, the revelation of Inari, and a visit from his parents while in the hospital. He closed his eyes as he remembered the conversation he had with his mother. Flashback. Minato had left an hour ago before he felt another presence through his chakra webs. He sighed a bit before the door opened and revealed his former mother, Kushina Uzumaki. She did not look well. Her hair was uncombed and her eyes were red and puffy. Before he could say anything, she rushed at him and hugged him while crying. He didn't know what to do. I don't know how to deal with this, he thought. Kushina managed to speak through her tears. Sachi, I am so sorry. We never meant to abandon you. He awkwardly pat her on the back as she continued to apologize for his abandonment. Eventually she managed to pull herself together a bit to speak clearly. When I realized that you were gone, I felt so horrible. Both Minato and I know how it is to grow up without parents and to unknowingly bestow the same fate to our son." She seemed to lose a bit of her composure and started to cry again. Naruto's gaze softened a bit as he observed his mother. This was further proof that they did not intentionally abandon him. No one could fake that kind of sadness. He sighed a bit and spoke. "When I learned that you abandoned me due to a genjutsu, I did not know what to think. After Minato explained his childhood, I doubted either of you would ever abandon me purposely." He looked down and touched his web markings. "If you had not forgotten me, I would have never have become as skilled in the subjects that I am today. I would never have met the Spider Clan, or would I have met Anko?" He looked at the hopeful face of Kushina. "I used to hate you too. It was my purpose for growing strong. I swore when I was locked out of the house to become stronger than all of you. But now my hatred for you has disappeared. However, I doubt I can ever think of you or Minato as my parents." Kushina started crying silently again but nodded in understanding. Naruto lifted his hand and smiled a bit. "But that does not mean we can't be friends." Kushina looked a bit shocked but laughed a bit and shook Naruto's hand. "Sure." Then flashback. He was still in thought when he heard footsteps behind him and he opened his eyes to see his teammate Lee. Lee smiled a bit. "I thought you would be here." Naruto returned to looking out at Konoha. "I like to come here to think." Lee walked up next to him. "You seem to be coming up here a lot." He snorted a bit and smirked. "That just means I have a lot to think about." Lee grinned. "I know how to clear some of your questions." He looked at Lee curiously as he followed him to a training ground. Lee spun around in the Goken stance. "In the midst of battle, you will be able to relight your flames of youth." Naruto looked confused a bit before he laughed. "Are you sure you want to fight me dead last?" Lee grinned wider as he charged forward at blistering speeds. "I am sure I can provide a worthy challenge, Mr. Rookie of the Year." He grinned wider and reinforced his body with the numerous toxins in his blood and rushed forward to meet Lee's punch. 1 hour later. Both Lee and Naruto are laying in the practice field exhausted when they both looked up to see Yakumo and Anko's smiling faces. They all started to laugh and joke around, while Naruto was inwardly thinking, "I can't see you guys as family because I already have a perfect one right here." Konoha Academy day of the Chunin exams. 5 hours before exam. Naruto's POV. Naruto, Lee and Yakumo are walking through the hallways of the academy, making their way to the 3rd floor for the first test of the Chunin exams. They had arrived early to spy on the competition and find a good unnoticeable position. Over the past few days they saw many foreign genin teams from across the 5 great villages and nobles arrive in Konoha for the exams. It was a miracle that no incidents were reported besides a small altercation with Asuna and Konoha team. They all noticed the small genjutsu on the 2nd floor, but Naruto quickly whispered, "Don't point it out, the less competition the better." Team 9 soon arrived at the testing room and saw there were not many teams in the room this early. There was only teams from Kumo, Sand, Kiri, and Iwa. The Kumo team had a blonde with generous assets alongside a red-haired tan-skinned girl and a tan boy with white hair sucking on a lollipop. The Asuna team consisted of a makeup-wearing boy and Onasi, a blonde girl with a large fan on her back, and a red-haired teal-eyed boy with a large gourd on his back. The Kiri team had a boy wearing sound dampeners with a large fish-shaped two-handled sword on his back wrapped in bandages, a flamboyant-looking boy in a large blue coat, and a tan boy with a trident strapped to his back. The Iwa team was the same team they had seen on their first C-rank mission. Naruto assumed that Iwa held them back to participate in this exam to demonstrate their strength. None of the teams spoke to each other as more and more teams trickled in. Naruto recognized all of this year's rookie genin teams. Nothing interesting happened until Shio's team entered. Shio had been teamed up with Sasuke Uchiha and Kiba in Yuzaka. He kept looking around the room before he heard his name. "I would like to know the information on Mito Gecko, Gaara of the Desert, and Menma." He looked at the group again and saw Team 7 standing before someone he recognized. He walked over before Kabuto could say anything. Hey Kabuto, never thought I would see you outside of the hospital." Naruto had met Kabuto while working part-time at the hospital. They often discussed different medical practices and theories. Shio looked up surprised at seeing her brother. "Oh. Hey Menma, how do you know Kabuto?" Kabuto pushed up his glasses a bit. "I know Menma-kun from working at the hospital, we usually work shifts together. Anyway, the information." He pulled out a card. "Mito Gecko, daughter of 2 of the premier swordsmen and swordswomen of Konoha, Heiei Gecko and Yagura Yuzumi. She was almost the Kunoichi of the year last year, but lost due to her lower marks in Genjutsu and throwing skills. She has been on 5 C ranks and 48 D ranks. It says here that her Kenjutsu skills are off the charts, as expected growing up with 2 masters of the art. Her teammates are Niji Hyuga and Tenten." Naruto kept an eye on the crowd as Kabuto listed the information and saw that the teams from Kumo and Kiri were interested in the Kenjutsu information. As expected, since those 2 villages were renowned for their Kenjutsu users. Kabuto pulled out the second card Gara of the desert, not much information on him seeing as he is from a foreign village, but I have here that he has come back from every mission without a scratch, even on a B rank mission. Everyone's eyes widen at that information. The white-haired medic pulled out a third card Menma, one of the only orphans besides Minato Namikaze to become Rookie of the Year. Specializes in poisons and medical ninjutsu. He has been on 1 A rank mission, which is very impressive, and 10 C ranks and 67 D ranks. His teammates are Yakumo Kurama and Rock Lee. Kabuto kept monologuing information, but Menma had lost interest and was observing the crowd. Soon after a small incident with some sound genin in a poof of smoke, several Chunin and Marino Ibiki appeared out of a shunshin. He quieted the room with his mere presence and barked out orders, "Alright all you little brats, I am the examiner of the first section of the Chunin exams. The first part of the exam is a written test. Everyone starts out with 10 points, if anyone is caught cheating they will lose half their points." Soon after everyone was settled, Naruto found himself between Kuretsuchi and the boy from Kumo. 15 minutes into the test and Naruto could only answer 3 questions, each requiring about Jonin level poison expertise or doctor level medical knowledge. He discreetly glanced around the room at all of the Chunin watchers. Why would they go to such great lengths to try and detect cheating? Ibiki could probably tell if anyone was trying to cheat him by himself blindfolded. He glanced towards the competitors nearest him and widened his eyes minutely when he saw Shiori Nara a few places away from him. He knew for a fact that she had graduated from the Chunin exams last year. So why is she here, he thought back to Ibiki's words. Anyone caught cheating will lose half their points, why not just remove the person who cheated immediately? That is what they did back in the academy. He paused, what if they want us to cheat? He discreetly looked around at some people and saw a few genin discreetly cheat, good for genin, but someone like Ibiki could easily spot it. He assumed that their cheating strategies were good enough for Chunin, so the proctors did not point it out. He smirked a bit. Closing his eyes he spread his chakra web around him and latched onto the tenketsu points of Shiori's hand and began to copy her hand movement on the questions. He was sure that at least one of the guards around him could sense his chakra being used, but he doubted they would call him out on it since it was not obvious. He glanced at Lee near the front sitting next to Hinata. He was sure that Lee was too honorable to cheat on the test, so he decided to give him a helping hand. Acting as if he was thinking, he bit his thumb and went through some hand seals disguised as cracking his knuckles and in a smokeless summoned 2 small spiders. One went to Yakumo while the other went to Lee. The spider landed on the desk and spun a small web detailing the answer to some of the shorter questions. Once 3 were filled for Lee, he dismissed the spiders. That was enough points to pass the test. Soon after the dramatic 10th question, the proctor of the next exam, their sensei Anko, led them to the forest of death. Anko began to scare the poor genins with her antics while she explained the test. Anko held up 2 scrolls. "Alright you maggots, the purpose of this test is to survive for 5 days in the forest behind me. While surviving the forest your goal is to gather a heaven and an earth scroll before proceeding to the tower in the middle of the forest. However, before we begin the test I would like all of you to sign these waivers, in case you die." There was some grumblings, but everyone signed the waiver and was given a scroll. When Menma signed the waiver and got a heaven scroll for the team, he smirked a bit as an idea came to him. He raised the scroll over his head and shouted, "Hey! Our team has a heaven scroll." Nearly everyone around him looked at him as if he was an idiot, but the proctors and judges of the test looked at him speculatively. What the genin around him did not realize is that he had protected his team from half the competition. No team would want to waste energy and a potential defeat on a team they knew had the scroll they did not need. With that stunt, Team 9 had become one of the best protected teams in the competition, while simultaneously luring only teams they needed to themselves. As they lined up at an entrance to the forest, he smirked a bit as he felt the small chakra of one of his spiders attached to the 2 genin teams whose gates were closest to theirs. As soon as the horn blared, he motioned for their team to follow the chakra signature that his spider was emitting and soon crouched on a tree above a rain village team. They observed the team a bit and smirked as one as the leader took out an earth scroll. Without having to be told, Yakumo did some hand seals and trapped the team in a genjutsu. Naruto took out 2 syringes full of knockout venom and jumped down, landing on 2 of the genins and stabbing them in a major artery, effectively taking them out of the competition, while Lee appeared behind the last member and chopped him in the back of the neck, knocking him out as well. Yakumo smirked as they took the earth scroll. That was easy. Naruto looked around suspiciously. Too easy. I say that we start heading to the central tower before teams get desperate enough to surround it, looking for people with both scrolls. After 3 hours of running, dodging wild animals, and avoiding teams with his chakra web, sensing they arrived at a small clearing. Naruto looked around. We should rest here for now, we want to be at full strength if we encounter another team. Lee nodded. Yes, it would be best if we wait for our flames of youth to replenish before continuing on to the tower. Ikumo nodded, already understanding youth speak to understand his meaning. We should lay some traps while we rest, even with your web we don't know if a team has the ability to counter or negate it. Menma nodded and his eyes glinted as he remembered one of the traps he wished to test. I have the perfect thing. Both Lee and Yakumo looked curiously as Naruto took out a black scroll and unsealed several mushrooms. Yakumo looked hesitantly at the shrooms, and what do these mushrooms do? Naruto chuckled evilly, if anyone steps on one of these it will explode sending a cloud of paralytic poison into the air, forcing the person who stepped on it to inhale it. No one will be able to sneak up on us with these around us Kukuku, on count to Team 9, but in a different dimension, every person classified as a jungler flinched simultaneously while a small Yordle chuckled evilly as he waited for more people to fall to his shrooms of death. 3 hours later 9 p.m. Team 9 had entered the tower and opened their scrolls which turned out to be summoning scrolls for a Chunin to explain the scrolls to them and explained that they had to stay in the tower for the next 3 days. Time inside the tower moved slowly for the team as there wasn't much to do. They could not train in case they were spied on by an enemy team. After the 5 days were up the teams that had passed were Kuretsuchi's team, the Kumo team with a lollipop-sucking boy, the Kiri team with a boy with sound dampeners, the Suna team with the red-haired boy, Team 8, Team 11, Kabuto's team, and Team 12. Team 7 had arrived with only a few hours to go for the competition. He was slightly surprised that Shio's team was the last to arrive. However when he saw the mentors Sasuke and Mito looked pretty roughed up and Shio seemed tired. He guessed they had fought a strong team and only barely won. Soon the proctors called all the teams to the arena and the tower and everyone prepared for the next event. Tower Arena Naruto's POV. All of the teams were lined up in front of the Hokage in a group of Jonin. Minato stepped forward and explained the rules of the competition. I am glad to see so much potential in one room. However, we have too many competitors to make it to the final round. In order to resolve this we are doing a preliminary round. Minato then proceeded to give a speech about how the Chunin exams were a replacement for war. A sickly-looking man stepped forward and spoke I will take it over from here Hokage-sama. My name is Heiichiko, and I will be the proctor for the preliminary round. The rules are simple, each battle will be a duel against a random opponent. The first person to surrender or be unable to fight will be out of the competition. He pressed a button on a remote and a screen emerged from the wall, the first 2 opponents will be. The screen flashed with 2 names. Sasuke Uchiha vs Yoroi Akato. The fight was not that impressive to Naruto. He was expecting more from the Uchiha heir. Although it appeared as if he was injured from the forest so his injuries could be inhibiting his performance. Although the move at the end was impressive. It appeared as if Sasuke made a swordless copy of the 3 crescent slash that the Gekko family was known to use. The next match made many of the Konoha and Iwa members present widen their eyes. Shino Aburam vs Kamizuro Suzumabachi. The feud between the Aburam and Suzumabachi clans was legendary. It was almost to the level of the Uchiha Senju feud. Ever since the Aburam killed most of the Suzumabachi clan members in the first war, they have hated each other. Soon Shino and Kamizuro stood across from each other. Soon many bugs were swarming around both genin. The battle was intense as neither side wanted to lose. Beetles against bees clashed in the air as both genin directed them. However similarly to the last war, Shino's beetles were swarming each bee, taking them down due to sheer numbers over the larger bugs. Eventually Shino stood victorious over Kamizuro, the corpses of many dead bees around them. Mitsumi Tsurugi vs Kankuro. The battle was quick and brutal. Mitsumi demonstrated his family skill of turning his arms to rubber and was prepared to break Kankuro's neck when it was revealed that Kankuro was a puppet that broke many of Mitsumi's bones in a twisted hug. Sakura Haruno vs Ino Yamanaka. This battle was pathetic to Naruto. Despite Sakura's good usage of Genjutsu, probably taught by her sensei Kurenai and Ino's use of her family's jutsu, they were barely genin level with their Taijutsu and Ninjutsu. Damari vs Shio Uzumaki Namikaze. Naruto raised his eyebrow at the matchup as the 2 girls walked to the arena. It was obvious that Tamari was a wind user with her giant fan. But he also knew that Shio was one of the best wind users in Konoha besides Asuma Sarutobi. The match started like he suspected, Tamari opened her fan and unleashed a great burst of wind at Shio while she unsealed her Nadachi and cut the wall of wind. It seemed both opponents were testing each other's wind affinity as they repeatedly blasted each other with wind. Naruto noticed that Tamari seemed to specialize in the force of wind while Shio specializes in the cutting aspect of wind. Soon Shio did one of her best moves, she used a wind cut to force Tamari to jump into the air, which is what the Konoha genin was aiming for. Her sword glows green and she jumped into the air at great speeds and slashed at Tamari repeatedly with the back of her sword. Shio landed gracefully and sheathed her sword while muttering majestic slash of the rising vortex. Tamari fell to the ground unconscious with many long bruises all over her body. All of the Konoha genin cheered for their fellow genin and waited for the next match. Shikamaru Nara vs Kintsuchi. The match was more a battle of brains than brawn, as Shikamaru outsmarted the sound Jinjutsu using Genin with his shadow mimic jutsu. Shikamaru proceeded to slam Kin's head against the wall of the arena, knocking her unconscious rather easily. Kiba Inuyasaka vs Samui. Naruto wanted to faceap him as the match progressed. Kiba seemed more distracted by Samui's breasts than the actual match. While Samui displayed brilliant sword play, she really did not need it with how Kiba was distracted. Eventually she countered Kiba's fang over fang with her storm release. Naruto assumed the storm release is a mix of water and air to create lightning clouds in the arena, which bombarded Kiba after he mistakenly grabbed Samui's chest. Then came the next match. Neji Hyuga vs Menma. Both Genin looked at each other, Neji hatefully and Menma emotionlessly. Neji had hated him ever since he had stolen his spot for Rookie of the Year. Anytime they met up, Neji would say he was doomed for failure due to being a clanless orphan. Soon they stood before each other and took their stances. Neji in the gentle fist style and Menma with his chakra scalpels. Once the match started, they both ran at each other with high speeds and began a taijutsu battle. Neither put force behind their strikes and were extremely technical in their strikes. Up in the stands. Sakura, who had recovered from her match with Ino when he turned to his teacher Kakashi-sensei, "Why are they not trying to attack each other forcefully?" Kakashi looked up from his book and spoke, "Neither of their styles of combat require forceful taijutsu. Neji is using his family's gentle fist style, which focuses on striking the internal organs and tenketsu points of the body by injecting chakra into the opponent's body. On the other hand, Menma is using an uncommon medic fighting style that revolves around the medical ninjutsu chakra scalpels. Menma can use those scalpels to cut open the internal organs of the body with just a light touch." Shio shivered as she remembered two arms out of the lake clutching her ankles. Back in the arena. Neji and Naruto quickly separates. Naruto glances down at his arm and sked when he noticed several finger-sized bruises on his tenketsu spots. Neji is clutching his arm as he had cut the tendons on it. Naruto went through some hand seals before thinking acidic bubbles, breathing out copious amount of bubbles towards Neji. Many people in the audience snickered at the perceived weak attack until one popped near the wall and the concrete started to dissolve. Soon all of the bubbles began to streak towards Neji. Neji inwardly frowned. "I haven't mastered this, but I have no choice." He started spinning until a chakra dome surrounded him, preventing any of the acid bubbles from hitting him. When he stopped spinning, he quickly had to duck as Naruto swung his arm at where his neck would have been moments before and twisted in mid-duck and struck 4 tenketsu points on Naruto's chest. He frowned a bit as the Naruto started to melt in a purple puddle and jumped away as Naruto tried to jab him from behind. Unknown to Neji, however, is that medical chakra was surging into his locked tenketsu on his previously closed-off arm. As Neji charged forward, Naruto quickly dodged a palm thrust and then quickly jabbed with his previously sealed arm, hitting Neji near the lungs with the chakra scalpel. Blood burst from Neji's mouth as he fell backwards. As soon as Menma was declared the winner, he began to heal Neji's wounds. He looked up at the board and saw the next match and worried a bit. R vs Rock Lee. What if Neglected Naruto is a medical prodigy? End here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.